Manana Sizuz, Todo Hamzu, and welcome to your 38th Guam Legislature, the People's House. And thank you for being here this morning for this morning's public hearing. This morning's public hearing is conducted by the Committee on Finance and Government Operations and is called to order at this time 0901 on April 28, 2026. First notice of this public hearing was disseminated to all senators and media outlets on April 21, 2026, with its second notice disseminated on April 24, 2026. These hearing notices were also made available on the Guam Legislature's website, our legislative calendar, and the Government of Guam's public notice portal. The committee will hear testimony on the following bills on the agenda. Bill number 309-38, introduced by Senator Vicente A.V. Borja, an act to amend Section 18 of Chapter 2 of Public Law 3860 relative to granting greater flexibility to the Guam Department of Education to utilize lapsed funds. We also have another bill on the agenda, which is 306-38 COR, introduced by Vice Speaker V. Anthony Ada. It's an act to add a new Article 15, Chapter 77 to Title 12, Guam Code Annotated, relative to tax credits for the development of affordable housing units. At this time, I would like to welcome my colleagues that are joining me. First of all, the Vice Chair of this Committee on Finance and Government Operations, Vice Speaker Tony Ada. Thank you for joining us. Morning, Mr. Chair. Senator Vince Borja, of course, the Education Chair, and whose bill will be heard soon. Also, Senator Sean Gumatauta, Senator Jesse Lujan, and Senator Tello Taidegui. Thank you, Senators, for joining us for this public hearing. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone in attendance of Legislature Guahan's general rules of conduct. Individuals testifying shall first be recognized by the chairperson before speaking and shall state their full name for record-keeping purposes. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance and the nature of the bill or whatever other matter is on the agenda. Personal inferences to the character or motive of any senator or individual testifying is not permitted. The chairperson of the committee may order the removal from this hearing of any member of the Legislature in Guam or the public audience who fails to observe proper decorum pursuant to the 38th Guam Legislature's standing rules. Any violation of this general rule of conduct will result in immediate removal from this public hearing room. With that, we will now proceed to hear testimony on Bill 309-38 COR. And I'll recognize the author of that bill now, Senator Vince Borja. Senator Borja, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to GDOE for coming down to speak in support, hopefully, for this bill. You know, Mr. Chair, when I first introduced this amendment during the budget bill, at the time I had a conversation with Dr. Swanson, who was the superintendent at the time, in regards to my intent. And of course, the thinking at the time was, okay, we're going to expect some lapsed funding because of the ARP revolving funds to fund the ARP projects. And at the time, they were estimating about $11 million to rotate to pay these ARP projects. And at the end, they were going to sit with $9 to $11 million at the time from ARP. And so when we proposed the amendment was, okay, let's try and prioritize addressing a lot of the sports facilities across the Department of Education. And so the amendment passed, and a lot has changed since then. Not only did the superintendent leave, we now have acting superintendent Dr. Judy Wonpat, which, of course, has changed some of the priorities, which is okay. The other thing that has changed is that there is 54 million now, I think, 77 million that has lapsed, and so now we have $77 million sitting. When Dr. Wonpat first came in, we discussed, of course, the flexibility to amend the law in January, and we talked about putting together a priority list, which at the time she was putting together with her new leadership team and was going to vet through the board and then submit. And so aside from that as well, we also had the typhoon now, which really has brought us to another crossroads in regards to some of the priorities. FBLG is another thing. Again, back when this amendment was made, the FBLG, at the time the leadership, Dr. Swanson, had identified another source of funding. Not sure what has changed. We're not here to discuss that. But again, when we did that, there was already funding identified for FBLG, which was why he had no objections at the time to support this amendment, or didn't really object to that amendment. But again, we're here today, new leadership, new priorities. A lot of things have changed. It's not what we thought it was or what it was then. And so this bill, for those that are listening, is to allow, again, do I want to, am I saying we need to, or we're going to deprioritize sports facilities? Not necessarily. It's still something that we'll continue to work with my colleagues and how we're going to address that and work with the Department of Education, Dr. Wampat and her team, to figure out creative ways to address this concern, because it's something that, as a coach, and being, and a lot of the sports facilities, the track for one, JFK, the track at GW, I mean, it's falling apart. For as long as I've been a coach with the Department of Education, Charles King Fitness Center, their track has gone through like 2 or 3 renovations, whereas, I mean, it's only within the last 6 to 10 years, versus GDOE, I don't think has done any major renovations or upgrades to the facilities. And so that is still a priority, but today we're here to, hear the bill, and I hope, ask my colleagues to support this bill and that will allow GDOE flexibility to address the FBLG, reopening of FBLG, but also there is a lot of, a bunch of other priorities that I'm sure they will share when Dr. Wampat delivers her testimony. So with that, thank you, GDOE, for coming down, and I ask my colleagues to support this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Jusmasi, Senator Borja, and Senator Barnett, thank you for joining us. So at this time, I will recognize former Speaker Judith Wampat to open on the bill, and I understand you're assisted by Mr. Leon Guerrero, your Finance Chair for the DOE. So go ahead and proceed with your testimony, Senator Vice Speaker or Speaker Wampat.
Mr. Jusmasi, buenas tardes. Senator, the Chairman of Ways and Means, Senator Duenas, DOE's chairman as well, Senator Borja. I'd like to also recognize Senator Gumatautau, Vice Speaker Tony Ada, Senator Lohan, Senator Barnett, and Senator Talataytagui. The Guam Department of Education, it respectfully submits this testimony in strong support of Bill 309-38 COR, which authorizes greater flexibility in the use of lapsed prior year appropriations. This legislation is both timely and necessary. It ensures that funds previously appropriated for the benefit of our public school system remain available to meet current and emerging needs. By extending the availability of these funds, GDOE will be better positioned to align resources with real-time priorities and respond with greater efficiency and accountability. A clear example of available resources that could support the department's critical needs is the approximately $77 million in restricted funds or lapsed funds identified in GDOE's fiscal year 2024 financial audit. The restricted funds are divided into 2 categories: $26 million prior year GOD lapsed funds and the $51 million in ARP salary reimbursement. The flexibility provided under Bill 309-38 would enable the department to retain and strategically deploy these funds to address pressing priorities across our school system. GDOE is awaiting a letter of determination from US DOE to allow for the unrestricted expenditure of the $51 million. In the event DOE receives an unfavorable letter of determination, GDOE will be requesting for a budget amendment to cover the 51. But we're feeling really very positive about this, but I still have to make sure that you are, aware of it. GDOE continues to face significant and ongoing challenges across its campus, including aging infrastructure, deferred maintenance, and the compounding effects of severe weather events, including Typhoon Sinlaku. These conditions directly impact the safety, functionality, and overall quality of learning environments for our students and educators. Bill 309-38 provides critical flexibility that will allow the department to strategically deploy available funds toward urgent facility repairs, storm recovery efforts, and essential operational and instructional needs. Without this flexibility, the department risks losing access to resources that are vital to addressing these pressing concerns. Moreover, this measure reinforces responsible fiscal stewardship by ensuring that previously appropriated funds are fully utilized for their intended public purpose. It supports continuity in improvement efforts and reduces inefficiencies associated with funding interruptions. On behalf of GDOE, I extend our sincere appreciation for the committee's continued support of public education. We respectfully urge the passage of Bill 309-38 COR to ensure that critical resources remain available to meet the needs of our schools, support our educators, and provide safe, effective, and resilient learning environment for all students. And I'm sorry, I forgot at the very beginning to introduce myself. I'm Judith Monpat, the Acting Superintendent of Education. And this was written some time ago when the bill was first introduced, but after reviewing it again, I'm going to ask for an amendment to the bill, and primarily because I do not want our hands tied when we specifically name a typhoon like Typhoon Sinlaku, because right now we do have some projects with FEMA for Mawar. So my recommendation, if I may, and of course whatever language you feel might be appropriate, is rather than to specifically name a storm, but to rather maybe say that, that due to severe maybe weather conditions or just typhoon damages, something to that effect, rather than naming a specific typhoon, primarily because one of the things we would be doing, similar to what we did with Mawar, is that we're having some conversations already for FEMA. And of course, the monies that will come in normally with the administrative costs of what we would have to put in, at least currently it's 90-10. We don't know what it would be for Sinlaku. It might be 15, 85. We don't know. But rather than being specific to say a storm and being specific in terms of a funding for us to look also to supplement what we have would be to name a grant or a federal, program. I think that should be it. Thank you very much, Senators, for your time.
Sijusmasi Speaker Wampat, also Superintendent of Department of Education. I will say that I personally don't have a problem with that amendment, but one thing I'm looking at as well, and I know that do you have any testimony, Mr. Leon Guerrero? I'm going to advocate once again, Madam Speaker, I don't believe there's any current contracts that have been procured. I know that there's been discussions of it with the 20 million that was transferred to, the D-land. Yes, and I think that we know that that's true, and I'm going to advocate for a recovery of that in order to be able to support that language. Simply because it doesn't seem to be working out under mold mitigation and other things that were discussed. Yeah. And I think that it's more appropriate for you to be able to utilize that. So I think along with that amendment should include the recovery of the 20 million from Department of Education to be able to do what it needs to do.
So what I was able to find out was that 6 million of that had been used to pay the National Guard who's out at all the schools collecting all of the debris. So the balance would be about 14 million.
That's fine. That's 14 million you don't have today.
Yes.
And it's 14 million to me that belongs at Department of Education, you know, in order to be able to mitigate the myriad of issues that you have. And so I think that should be administered. Your finance deputy has proven his worth in terms of managing resources and managing them effectively and getting out contracts. In fact, thank you for when you came here early, Madam Speaker, to say that, and I think the finance chair can proudly say that people are now back to doing business with DOE. They're entertained again to come in and do business because they know that they're going to get paid within a reasonable time. So we'll work on this together. The bill will get a markup, Madam Speaker, and we'll keep you abreast of those developments as we go forward. So I know that we have the deputy, Franklin Leon Guerrero, who signed in support of Bill 309-38, as well as Mary Okada, I guess representing herself, and also the board, correct? Signing up in support. Thank you, Dr. Mary Okada, for signing up in favor of this bill as well. So I will go to the author for any questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, thank you, GDUE, for coming down here. In regards to lapse funding, what are the amounts and specific categories for any kind of lapse funding that is being restricted by this funds? Because I know that there has been a lot of conversation around like PTO. Supposedly there's funds that have been told were restricted. So what is the amount in the PTO account that is considered lapse funding, or any account that has any kind of lapse funding, and what those amounts are? Whether it be the Healthy Future funds, any money that is restricted right now. Aside from I mean, obviously the ARP was, what that amount is as well too.
Yeah, the school non-appropriated funds don't fall under that. They're in separate bank accounts. So the prior year lapses is a set of cash that's in our bank account that is on hold. So do we have demands for that cash? Yes. As you said, the landscape has changed from a year ago to now. The revenue tax challenge with their software and getting revenue in, it has affected the whole of government, including allotments to GDOE for its monthly allotments type thing. So it's been a struggle, quite honestly. There were invoices popping out of the bushes, so to speak, that we didn't know existed. So we actually have more invoices to pay than were expected. Now, was the work relevant? The work was relevant. It was on school refurbishments, the 12 school refurbishments, leaking roofs. Unfortunately, whoever did the estimate for the leaking roofs underestimated the amount of square foot for leaking, and the contractor came to us and said, we can only fix this amount of square feet leaking, but there's more. Do you want us to fix more? And it really doesn't make any sense to go to other work until you fix the roof. So promises were made, work was done. Now the invoices are coming due. So a large part of the lapses really are going to go towards resolving those claims by that refurbishment contractor. But also FBLG reopening, unfortunately there were some major systems that were overlooked, like fire suppression, cafeteria equipment, bells, gym. There were things that were overlooked that weren't part of that money that was available at the time for FBLG. So now, to open the school, these things that were overlooked have to be addressed, they have to be procured, and there's no money set aside for that. So that's where we're coming back to what we're talking about to you today, releasing the restrictions so we can get about the important business of the people to get these schools open.
But I guess my question again is, so funding like PTO, because like there was money, at least when we asked earlier in January, there was about 200-some thousand. Is that money still available? Dr. Okada's nodding her head like yes.
Yeah, I guess Dr. Okada said yes, so definitely we'll look into it. But if I may add, in addition to what my deputy said, is that the restricted funds that we had, ARP, we've actually, of course, used up most of it. What was because of the expiration date, but what we weren't able to use it for are for a lot of modifications that were done for the 12th refurbishment, and then there's the interest cost added to that. So all those now would have to be paid out of local funds because we don't have the federal funds to be able to pay those.
How much is left from ARP? Or not ARP, but we were revolving money to pay for ARP. How much money is left after you paid the final bill before the deadline from lapse funding?
So I think it's about 3 million.
3 million? Is there a reason then, because there are still are there any outstanding bills right now from ARP that still need to be paid?
What I wanted to say, 3 million is a lot of money in anybody's checkbook. But what happened here was the circumstances. President Trump came in, and President Trump called for a strategic pause on the U.S. Department of Education, and they stopped the money flow on ARP. They stopped it. So management at the time did the prudent thing, and they sent letters out to the Guam contractors working on ARP projects, said stop. Because we're not sure President Trump is going to turn the money back on again. So the prudent thing was to stop. So they stopped, our contractors stopped. And then eventually, the go was given to go. Now, lots of things happened. There was demobilization costs, remobilization costs that were not anticipated. There was time frames, because the federal grants have time frames. So the spending down and the buying of stuff on the time frame, you have to commit monies during that time. And some of the projects, some of the contractors said, because of the strategic pause, the cost of the supplies have changed. So now we need a mod to the contract to increase it because of the change. But the request for the mod came outside of the window of opportunity to obligate ARP funds. So it was just a sequence of events. It's not that we fell asleep at the wheel, so to speak, and that we just let this money lapse. There were certain events that happened that precluded the full expenditure of that. Although I can tell you absolutely that in the closing days of that grant, we worked diligently, burning the candle at both ends to figure out what was allowable and how we could expend it. We left no resource unutilized to spend the money that we could. Thank you.
How much in invoices do we still owe for ARP?
20 million, 20 to 30 million.
Is this just to one contractor? Do you know what's the breakdown by contractor?
There's 2 contractors, one is primarily the bulk of it, and another one.
So in regards to that, I know that the priority list that you guys sent, Cortec, I'm sure it's like one of the bigger bills that we received. But in your priority list, you only had $875,000 allocated to Cortec. How do you plan to fully pay Cortec for anything due to them and any interest that may come up?
There was a discussion about that, and so we have 2 pots of money, if you will, the prior year lapses and the ARP. Prior year lapses, the 26 million was going to do Cortec primarily. So the spending plan was identified for the 51 million from the South.
You don't have a breakdown of how much for those specific contractors are owed to them? To Cortec?
I don't have it with me, but I can
or Northern?
get it. But I can tell you this, that the contractor that is owed the significant amount of money is very aggressive. And as Dr. Wantat said earlier, there's late fees and interest, and now they are basically asserting their right to charge interest on the interest if we don't resolve this. So they're very aggressive in their collection methods, and the money meter keeps ticking, so to speak.
And I want to go back again to lapse funding, because I know we just talked about the PTO funding. There, you don't have a list of any other, because you're asking us to give you more flexibility for lapse funding. Aside from ARP, what are the other accounts and amounts of money that you need more flexibility to use, or that you are restricted from using?
There's none really, because a lot of the federal grants that we have, those are either one have been already, the liquidation has been requested for. There is other SPED grants, consolidated grants, and GovDev grants that would total about $81 million, but those are not restricted in the sense that we can't use them. We just need to start to draw those down. I mean, spend obligated before the end of this fiscal year. There are, however, again, other amounts that have been left on the table that we got a briefing just last week from our internal auditors, and those monies already are from grants from fiscal year 23, 24, and 25. So those left on the table, my understanding was like 20 million. So those are not so much in terms of any kind of restriction for us not to be able to, I mean, for this legislation to, allow us to spend those down. Those are very specific to years and specific dates. But locally, it is primarily this language for us to be able to use the 26 million lapses and the 51, primarily because what we're requesting for are not specific only to sports facilities and repairs for the field lights, although we included it in the spend plan to address some of those, inclusive of playgrounds for the children as well, playground equipment. But for the most part, the largest bulk for us that we are unable to address will be the 9 individual items or construction work that needs to be done at FB. We didn't anticipate the gym at FB to be damaged. That happened as a result of malware, so we needed to include that as well.
And for FBLG, what is the breakdown of the amount of money that you need?
It's approximately 10 million right now. I mean, what it's doing is it's holding up procurements, but temporary campus collateral equipment, classroom furniture, fire suppression system, alarm system, bell system, intercom system, Ansel system for the cafeteria if you're going to cook, IT infrastructure, the whole IT, the wiring of the building for network and phones was somehow overlooked. So now the bill comes due. Supplies, the gym, 2 water heaters, $200,000 for water heaters, and gym maintenance. Well, the gym itself is multi-million. We have to demo temporary classroom demolition. So those are some of the items. They're longer term items, some of them, so the procurement's on hold. So releasing the restrictions on the money allows us to get the procurements flowing. And that's really one of the greatest positives we can get from the enactment of this bill.
Based on the current appropriation, where are you guys at in regards to cash position? Are you guys spending, and the spend plan approved by the board, are you guys spending your appropriation? Like, are you anticipating any lapses as we continue to move through the fiscal year based on your expenses?
Actually, right now, with some analysis that was done and comment from our internal auditor, right now, we're looking at a deficit spending, actually, not lapses. deficit. Because when you take all these invoices from the contractors that are coming out of the woodwork to pay, we pay all the invoices that we have right now, we are potentially looking at a deficit.
And I think like that's where I struggle, because you guys sit here and say you're looking at a deficit, but you can't give me a breakdown. I would assume at this point, if you're expecting a deficit, you would have a breakdown of the contractors that are owed. You would have a breakdown of all the different items that we would need to. When can we get that, at least to the committee, so that we could review that as we continue to go through this bill?
We can get that tomorrow or the next day. We can get it to you. Part of it, a little bit of the hesitancy is that, unfortunately, some of the invoices are just becoming known to us, and they're not from the construction companies. It's from some of the special education vendors that were providing support. Somehow, invoices for them had not been paid, and they've starting to come forward and requesting payment. So, like everybody's heard of Tiny Eye. This is about a special education service for Tiny Eye, and they were due at $1,700,000 in arrears, and it's come to light recently. We're addressing it. They're working with us. We're buying that down. We have not bought it all down because now we need the release of the prior year funds and stuff, so we can pay them down totally. But now another contractor has come to light and said, you didn't pay us. So I can tell you what I know, and that I can put down for you.
And my last question is, with the should you get approval to use the 77 million, are you guys confident, because the budget chair has already put out a notice that we're not going to allow any lapse funding to be used in the new fiscal year? Are you guys confident that you're going to be able to spend that 77? I mean, I'm sure you have a lot of things that you can spend it on, but do you think you're going to be able to spend that 77 million by the end of the fiscal year?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you found more millions, we could spend that too.
I mean, considering the procurement constraints, you're still confident that you're going to spend 77 million?
Yes, we need FBLG to open. Everybody wants FB to open, so we need to get on those procurements. It'll become a higher priority. The thing with procurement, at least in DOE, is that many of the procurements that we're attempting are federal funds. Federal funds had windows of opportunity. So if I stop all these federal funds, windows of opportunity procurements, and put FBLG on the top, the time starts ticking on some of the others. So I'm constantly in that rob Peter, pay Paul so far as to get things through the procurement process. And I think it would be helpful sometime, not now, but sometime to analyze this whole procurement process and the involvement of the Attorney General's office and this and that, because timelines are long. And when timelines are long, what we've had to do in our procurement is start cutting off accepting new procurements, because you gotta clear what's in your logjam before you accept new. So that becomes a shuffle, and federal funds have timelines. So it's a challenge. We could talk about that later.
Okay, I know I said last one, but I was just kidding. One more, federal funds, are we giving back, or how much in ARP did we return?
Approximately 3 million.
You say 3 million?
Yes.
What about the other, like, consolidated grant? Are there any other federal funds that we may possibly return, or do we still, are we still?
ARP was the big one, and anything else, federal grant returns was much less. So 100,000 here maybe, and there's multiple reasons because of time frames and stuff, but by and large, one of any significance was ARP, and we really burned the midnight oil to spend what we could.
What about special ed, SPED funding, IDEA? Did we return, at least since you've been in this seat, how much money have we returned that you're aware of?
For SPED, but these are older years. There's like 23, 24, and 25. So I think for SPED, it's about maybe, about 18, I think, million. That's why I'm saying the total amount for this year for those aging type of grants are a total of like $20-some million. What we do have that we can spend and should spend and obligate before the end of this year is about $80 million. And two large ones are with consolidated grant, 31 and 33 million, and SPED and GOSDEF. Those are the three big ones.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no further questions at this time. Thank you, Dr. Wampet and Mr. Leon-Guerrero.
This is Masi, Senator Borja. Mr. Leon-Guerrero, I just want to make sure we clarify something. Because when we met for your pre-budget meeting, and then Sinlaku booted your budget meeting, your fixed costs are not deficit spending. Your salaries, benefits are tracking, correct? Because these are contractual obligations that are either, unfortunately, when we returned the $3 million, because prior management wasn't paying their bills, all these things that are coming out of the woodwork are outside of the budget process on our contractual obligations, that fortunately now we're reprogramming the funding capabilities of expenditure to handle that, correct?
That's correct.
So your salaries, benefits, operational currently, that's not deficit spending, that's on track. But the discussion we're having here today are all the contractual obligations that otherwise could have been pegged against ARP, and also our contractual obligations that are procurement outside of fixed costs.
Absolutely.
Okay, just because I know where this might go, and I want to make sure we have taken care of you when it comes to operating Department of Education. Contractual obligations are a separate entity.
Yes, they are.
Thank you, sir, and once again, keep up the great work. Senator Gumatautau, and before that, I want to recognize Senator Montanani, welcome. Also, Senator Perez, welcome.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And thank you for DOE for being with us this morning. Acknowledging that BBMR and the administration considers unexpended prior year appropriations basically as non-existent for line agencies, including GPD, DOC, and GFD, does GDOE have a spend plan to maximize any available surplus for specific and planned expenditures within a certain period of time? And should the legislature consider establishing a deadline of 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months for GDOE to encumber its carryover funds?
Senator, I know that that's the exact same thing I was told, that we have no lapses. The difference is that we do because the money is in the bank versus paper lapses versus actual cash in the bank. So that part has been established. Now, based on our spending plan, and it could change, but a lot of these are expenditures that we must expedite as soon as we can, barring, of course, any delays at the AG's office. Is that the largest amount, like approximately 10 million of that, would be to get FBLG ready for operation in August. So that's a large, amount that we're talking about. Then, of course, there's all the others. So we do have a plan, and the plan was to go in and start to cut all of these RFPs and requisitions that we need to as quickly as we can to expend, of course, the full amount. Another large amount is what we would have to pay out of local funds, would be the remaining balance for the 12 schools that were being refurbished with ARP monies. That in itself right now is about $20-some million. So you would expect that would be done quickly.
So what about establishing a deadline, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months to encumber those carryover funds? What's your take on that?
Well, right now, I would say for the most part, when you look at our plans, it's going to be we're looking at the opening of the school year, so we're looking at August for majority of these things to be expended, and then others that might take a little bit longer in terms of we can encumber them. We can do an RFP, like for example, to order, bleachers, to order cafeteria equipment, to order, playground equipment. Those, will come. I'm not going to say Right now, we only really have approximately how many months left before the end of the year, so we have only about 8 months left that we have to expend this. So the plan is to expend it by this year.
No, I know you can spend it, but are we looking at 6, 12, 18? What's the sweet spot, do you think? Because this is going to affect future types of uses, right?
Yes. We gave an example, we shared a plan with the senators. I've just informally shared the plan as well with the board to the tune of 51 million, but we need to still have some more workshops. Sometimes other problems would surface, and then of course financial issues that we would have to address. Like, for example, we just found out last week, and not specifically for local funds, but for federal funds, that we've not paid for years, and now we are doing a catch-up.
And I guess that's my concern, is that we allow it and then we wait for years. So I'm trying to, if we're in a position where we have the money, we can do it. I'm thinking if we put it at, let's say, conversation 12 months, it forces the agency, or in this case GDOE, to move quickly and prioritize spending versus, well, you know what, maybe I'll wait.
I think 12 months would be adequate. Just understand that there's always the balance with we have 300 requisitions in our system today, 300 for our procurement staff to deal with. This is, of course, going to add to that. There's different types of procurements. There's small business, small purchases. There's IFBs, RFPs. They all take different amounts of times. But I think 12 months is adequate time for me to take all that into account and still clear through the money.
All right, thanks, Frank.
Yes, sir.
The $77 million general fund surplus that Bill 309-38 would authorize GDOE to spend was substantially created, as we talked about just earlier, by the U.S. DOE's approval of $54 million in extended ARP liquidation for GDOE's teacher payroll costs. Has the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Inspector General, Program Office, or any other federal oversight body opened a review, audit, or inquiry into GDOE's ARP extended liquidation approval? And what is the current federal audit status of these funds, and has GDOE received any correspondence from US Ed indicating any risk of fund recovery?
The only, I guess, how should I say this, the Secretary of Education and her assistant basically at the most recent CCSSO meeting in DC basically told us that March 28 is the final deadline to be able to expend any ARP monies. Therefore, whatever we didn't expend or obligate even before that, then we can't, there's no extension whatsoever. So that is why we were saying that the 12 projects that did not meet that time frame, because there was this technicality that we were grappling with, where we brought in the comptroller, our auditors, our attorneys, the procurement office, because we found out that on December 31st of last year, all of those 12 contracts had expired, but work was still ongoing. And how do we continue to expend the ARP monies knowing that these contracts have expired? And that's why we had to bring in our attorneys to be able to do it. So what we were able to do then, based on the dates of these invoices that were coming in, that's what we were able to pay out before or by March the 28th. And the amount that I gave you is $3 million, so the exact amount is 3.4 that I just received.
All right, thank you.
Sean, I would just like to add,
Yes,
Senator,
please.
is that as far as I'm aware, there's no formal audit on the ARP monies that have identified this $51 million restriction or hold. But there was a local audit by Ernst & Young, an annual audit for DOE, and it was the local auditors that said, we're not sure, even though the U.S. Department of Education paid you the $51 million, we're not sure all the I's were dotted properly and the T's were crossed. So that's what the local auditor said. So based on an abundance of caution because of the local auditor, we said hold and let's go get a letter of determination from U.S. Department of Ed. Because of the reshuffling, if you will, under President Trump, and U.S. Department of Ed is somewhat in disruption. So we've been trying to get that letter of determination. It wasn't anything issued on their part. So but because of our local auditor's caution flag, we are, as an abundance of caution, don't spend something that you might not get to really spend and have to pay back. So that's why we're asking for the letter of determination, and we have asked for it and will continue to ask for it.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
And Senator, because when I was in DC, I also met with US DOE Dr. Forrester, and he's correct, is that we were informed that US DOE has been spread out, sent out to the Department of Labor, Department of Justice, Department of Treasury, the Labor Department. So when I met with Dr. Forrester and I did ask about the letter of determination, she wasn't able to respond because right now in her unit, she's the only person from US DOE that now will be moved to the Department of Labor. And so they don't have the individuals to be able to refer, I guess, the request, because we've requested 3 times, and all those times we have not received anything. We've even asked our consultant that we currently have on board, the Bruman, to also inquire on our behalf, and they too have not heard.
No, and that's important for the community to understand is as you are leaning forward to double check to make sure you're spending the numbers or the money correctly, there's going to be a lot of, look at fraud, waste, and abuse, specifically from Treasury, which is, I think they've been the most public about going after these programs. So I ask that just as, and I appreciate your insight, because we are all going to be watching that with a lot of anticipation.
And the way we're looking at this as well, because we've requested 3 times and we were being very cautious about it, and that's why
Understood.
I mentioned also to the legislature just in case. But I think the fact that, we've made several attempts and then to proceed with it, and we'll document, of course, all of the expenditures, that it's going to get to the point where, they're going to say, well, they have not responded, so we got to move. We can't just continue to have it sit there when knowing for a fact that we need to start drawing down these monies.
Got it. If you can you tell us, and I'm looking at it from a different lens here, but what portion of your share of the limited gaming fund has been expended by the department, if you can tell us, over the last couple of years, maybe 3? Are there specific sports facility projects that have been supported using the limited gaming fund that you might be aware of?
No, yes. We do know that, yes, it actually goes to coaches' salaries for interscholastic. So, and we're up to date with those. Those are not.
But not actual sports facilities themselves?
No.
Okay, because I was going to talk about, how do you use that to improve sports facilities? I think the OPA had said there's close to $80 million in unspent general fund revenues at the end of 24, which was exacerbated that you had about 12.1 in expired federal funds as of December 2025. And would you support reprioritizing a share of the LGF to support maybe other facilities across the villages, whether they be DOE or village or DPR facilities?
There have been some requests from some mayors for where we have schools, if they could co-share, they would help do some of the maintenance and maybe lawn cutting and stuff like that. So we have it's not a secret that the sport fields are in disarray. I mean, Southern High can't even play on their sports field. They have to be bused somewhere else to another field. So do we recognize that there's a great need? We do. But when we have contractors threatening penalty interest and you owe me my first day of work, a contractor said, you owe me $23,000 for a late payment. Okay, so I'm like, okay, the sporting fields and the tracks are all important. Everything's important, but from a DFAS perspective, I need to mitigate the money loss. So it doesn't make sense. I mean, yes, let's fix the fields, but it doesn't make sense when we're incurring penalties and late interest on this for the school canopies and stuff like that.
Oh, no, Frank, I think the priority would be the school facility first, and the fields are somewhere at the bottom.
It's there. We've recognized it in the spend plan. We put money for bleachers. There's a request for new bleachers, floodlights at some of the fields. That's all in the spend plan.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much for that, Frank.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Chair, for the time today.
Susmasi, and reminder to our colleagues, we are using the 5-minute clock. Vice Speaker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Madam Superintendent, thank you for being here, and Mr. Leon-Guerrero. Mr. Leon-Guerrero, was there a transition between the previous leadership and the current leadership now? Did you guys have a transition plan, and was all documentation and everything that was previously done with that leadership to you folks? I
can speak for my swim lane as the incoming deputy superintendent for finance. I was first of all, my predecessor was busy. So was there a schedule? Was there an agenda? Was there a methodical transition? No. Was there, he's available from 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock? Yes. And it was to shadow him on some of his meetings, or unfortunately, there was not time, or time was not made, or I was not afforded time to sit down and say, these are the priorities, this is where the money needs to go, this is the challenges, this is where we're on thin ice, or anything. There was none of that. So, and I have to tell you, it's not my place to say, but I will tell you, as minimal as a transition as that was, there was another deputy that had less than that. So unfortunately, the transition wasn't planned, it wasn't methodical, it didn't define where your prioritization should be and what the challenges are. And unfortunately, some of the things that we're dealing with today were challenges that were a year in the making, 18 months in the making, and the people, had they addressed the situation then, would have been easier and less costly and all of that, but we were not afforded that. So it's kind of, we were on a journey of discovery, sir, and we're still standing, and we're committed to getting the right things done the right way.
And I think when you're dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars, you would think there would be a proper transition of, documentations of the finances of what's going on, and contractors and things of such that I'm just taken back that there was no proper transition.
There was no handout. There was no piece of paper.
Yeah. Madam Superintendent, when you and the previous superintendent had gotten together, was there any communication between both of you that was said, between superintendents and your deputies, that there'll be a proper transition of teams to ensure the smooth operation of GDOE from their leadership to your leadership?
Yes, I met several times with the superintendent, and I've asked him also whether certain individuals in the department who could assist or be a go-between to request for a lot of the information that we would like to be able to read and prepare, because there was just so many documents and it couldn't be done in 2 or 3 meetings. And so he did authorize that, of course, to occur, made sure then that the deputies would respond and provide the information. So that's what we were doing. We were reading a lot of the information. I asked what are some of the outstanding, issues that maybe we should be looking at. And I was really, in a sense now, when I think about it, since we've been in, that those were not revealed at all. Like, for example, the issue we were currently being faced with special education and where we are, financially. So it was like, my deputy said, we were really in that journey of discovery, because when vendors were coming to us, we were finding that it's out of sight, out of mind when invoices come in and they sit on a desk, and whatever the reason is that it didn't go out to, it didn't make it to the finance office, the business office, you know, all we know is that they're late, and we needed to do a catch-up now and figure out how can we pay for many of these through their federal funds before the grants are expired. And the worst part of it all is others that we found that we couldn't very well use local funds, so then we get this request to use indirect costs. And we can't even do that because we have not finalized a negotiating rate yet with US DOE. So I have just put a stop of expending any of those monies other than right now for, you know, what is currently existing, like some of the salaries for some of our individuals who are 50% local, 50% federal, or 100%, you know, local, but being paid out of IDC.
Yeah. And, you know, Mr. Leon, you're mentioning that you'll be able to spend I'm looking at your spend plan here, and the $51 million, you'll be able to spend that all in the next 5 months?
I said 12 months.
12 months?
12 months. It's a balance. And if I could, just for a minute, I want to give one last view. There wasn't a very comprehensive transition. One of the things we found out, we started January 1st. What we found out was the contractors had come to us, the heavy-duty school refurbishment contractor. He had turned in a modification to modify the contract for extended work. He had turned it in 4 months to DOE before the contract expired. You cannot mod a contract once it's expired. He turned in the modification request 4 months before the contract expired. DOE at that time did not act on it. And so the contract expired December 31st. We started January 1st. The transition had no information on why this proposed modification contract mods weren't acted on. All I know is that you cannot modify an expired contract. So now we got into problems. And when we found out that contract was expired and there was mods on the table, and not only were the mods on the table, the contractor was working as if the mods were approved, which they weren't approved. So you can imagine the legal nightmares we started getting into. And the money that was going to pay for that was, oh, by the way, ARP, which was getting ready to expire. So with the legal requirements, the contractor coming out of the woodwork, it was quite the challenge, and it was a journey of discovery because we had no word that this was waiting for us. So,
okay, thank you for that, Mr. Chair, and maybe a question later, but thank you for that. I appreciate your time.
Ms. Mossy, Vice Speaker Ada. Senator Taitigui, you recognize?
Sujit Mossy, Mr. Chair, and good morning to my colleagues. Of course, good morning to DOE. I do have just a couple questions regarding, you know, the scenario that you mentioned earlier about, I think I heard you say something about an amendment, because when I read the fiscal note from BBMR, they mentioned that you want to make some arrangements or amendments in the bill. Can you clarify what that amendment would be?
Oh, the amendment was basically from a school sports facility to now open it up for all of these items that we said we needed to do this, you know, school year.
This particular bill, though?
Yes, this particular
Okay, but
bill.
it does allow that authority. This bill will allow that authority.
Yes, this bill
Yeah.
definitely will allow it.
So when you first had the funding available, what actually stopped you from using the funding?
The law.
Which law?
Your budget law. There was a section in the budget law that says that any lapse monies should be used for sports facilities and the sort, primarily more for sports.
But
and we needed to go beyond that.
Was that in the budget bill before we went to session?
That was in the final budget law.
Okay, but it wasn't in the budget bill that you reviewed?
No,
the
not
budget
this
that
year.
went on the session floor?
No, this was
Okay,
for
so it was
fiscal
something
year
included on
26.
in the session floor?
Yeah,
Okay.
not that.
Now, but before that, did you have the authority to use this funding? If we didn't put it in the budget bill, would you have been able to use this funding? For
Yes,
the,
because usually there's language
to allow
basically
you?
to allow us, you're right, for
Okay, so,
carryover.
okay, so you had that authority.
Yes.
The question I have, because it doesn't have a whole lot of, there was another bill actually introduced that had, well, a lot of things in there like continuing appropriations versus this bill, 309. It allowed DOE to carry over unspent funds for the next year. General operations, previously approved projects. There were some, have you seen Bill 284? Have you seen Bill 284? Okay,
No.
that comes before 309, but yeah, there was a bill that was actually previously introduced. I thought maybe we can do a comparative because it's obviously that this bill got before Bill 284, and was just wondering if you had an opportunity to see that bill, which actually did the same thing almost, but if there's anything in that bill that we can incorporate into 309, because, for some reason that bill is in front of us today. Is there anything that, so have you had a chance to see 284?
If you're saying it's similar,
Actually,
Or
it gives you more flexibility than,
then I can only speak, of course, in my previous experience of being in the legislature, that depending on what the standing rules say, whether one is that either the first bill introduced, or two is that you consolidate based on the markup, or third, it just depends again on the rule of the majority. So really,
we know how that rolls.
I'm just leaving it up to you, senators, to decide what will be best. We are going to be the beneficiary, of course, of what you pass. So I look to your experience and your wisdom to make that decision to benefit the
but
department.
unfortunately, sometimes that, Speaker, that even though it's in the best interest of the people, it's put aside.
I totally
sometimes,
understand.
Unfortunately. But what we're here today is discuss this bill that can actually be better. I mean, in the first place, I'm surprised we had to. So if you have an opportunity, and as a speaker here, superintendent, that things can be changed in committee reports, and we can incorporate what needs to be done. So you can also provide a second testimony, maybe an amended testimony or revision testimony to this bill, maybe incorporating some of the stuff in Bill 284 if you had an opportunity to read. The second part that I noticed in the bill, it really didn't have a lot of accountability. Do you actually have a plan which not just itemizes what you're going to spend the money on, but gives a priority, like which project is going to be first, second, third, regarding using this money, and a timeline of completion? Do you have that?
We don't have it written, but I know that in our discussion and what I mentioned earlier today is that one of the top priority, of course, would be to get FB Leon Guerrero Middle School fixed, and ready for the opening of the school year. So that definitely is a top priority. I mean, they all are important, and that's why we gave basically a time frame of 12 months, because some other items we might be able to move a little bit further behind, like some of the, for the, the social studies and science textbooks, the emotional intelligence curriculum that can, come, months later. And so that's the time frame that we're looking at. I would like that as soon as we're able to do this, is now go back and then have our procurement office start to cut, or put out RFPs for all of the work that needs to be done at FB Leon Guerrero Middle School, and that's about 9 projects of approximately $10 million. So that, at least off the bat, I can tell you what we consider to be a top priority.
Well,
but what we can do, if you like, we'll go back and then we will meet again with our people, and we can submit to the chairman, of course, a priority plan and a time frame as well, and we'll list them accordingly.
I'd just like to add as well that the board, the Board of Education. We go before them with the spend plans and the prioritization. We're constantly being monitored by them. There's a working committee of the board, financial. So I want to tell you that we just don't arbitrarily say we're going to spend this money. There is a process. The board is first and foremost in that process. And then, of course, the legislature will be able to give you any report you want. I'll tell you that this management team that superintendent has put together is nothing if it's not accountable. We're totally accountable. So prioritizations is a little, you can come at it from two ways. FBLG, absolutely, #1 priority. But then you step down a little bit and you say, what can be done quickly, low-hanging fruit? What can we, if it's on the list, maybe we can do that while we're working on the RFPs for FBLG. What can we do simultaneously? A big heavy hitter and a smaller lower hanging fruit. We're trying to maximize our throughput through the procurement process. We got to do it right. We dot the I's and cross the T's. So it's a process.
Thank you, Mr. D'Angelo, and dot your I's and cross your T's, and that's one thing that I appreciate doing, but there's another thing to incorporate that in the law too as well. And if you have no problems with transparency and accountability, then I think it would be prudent to put that in this legislation, to incorporate a priority listing and an itemized list of how you're going to spend the money, but most especially with a timeline. Money has been tossed around left and right. Everyone has an excuse why they're not doing it, but I know that the former oversight chair of DOE had an accountability every month by meeting with the school and putting a timeline and a spreadsheet list so that not only us, but the public can follow too, especially parents, so they can see what DOE is doing. So, and in the fiscal note, it does mention that they suggested included officially involving the Board of Education, the Guam Education Board, and simply definitions on how the funds may be used was incorporated in the fiscal note. So I think that would be a great idea, considering there's a lot of mistrust in DOE with all these with all these audit reports coming out, everything from air conditioners to textbooks to laptops. This is one thing after another. And unfortunately, you've inherited a lot of these issues. So I think it's important that you incorporate this in this legislation, or request that it be part of this legislation. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity, and thank you, DOE, for continuing to try and bring that transparency to fruition. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I respond?
Yes, I also have a clarification for you, but go ahead.
Okay, I totally understand, of course, where the senators, are coming from in terms of trying to hold the department accountable and set sometimes all of these timelines, reporting and all that. My only request is that, do not make it so specific that you tie our hands and you give us some wiggle room, so to speak, because if you're going to say that and be the ones to decide which of these items that we're listing as, part of the spend plan, is not say that we want to make this. Let us be the one to decide that, in the sense that, yes, we're saying FB is important, that's our top priority, but I don't want any of the other ones to go above it or even set it for us, because we just don't know sometimes what really is happening in the department, what, with these unforeseen circumstances or problems that may arise, that then now we can't move because the law was very specific.
Yeah.
I will follow the law.
Madam Speaker, also, because I just want to be clear on this, when we have discussed, not only just for this bill, but also consistently, budget hearing and we have consistently asked you for a spend plan, correct?
And yes.
And we wanted supporting documentation for any appropriation going forward, correct?
Most definitely, because that's the one thing we said, is that we're wanting now to make sure to rebuild the trust with the department. And that's why we're very open in terms of what our findings are, to let you know what they are, what actions we're taking to correct them. We're doing the exact same thing with the board, and with also the auditor, the public auditor. So when he sent back to us the audit, then already a committee has been addressed to go through for corrective actions, like for the textbooks. That is currently happening. For the curriculum management audit, we did the same thing. We met with the consultants as well. They agreed to go ahead and do the change of the matter of fact mistakes. Plus, we're also going through, again, each division. We've incorporated, we brought in the members of all the divisions as well, because those problems that they feel, or rather that they've identified to be an issue, that then we want corrective plans as well, or corrective actions from all of them. So all those are being done currently.
Correct. And Speaker, let's be clear, the First Amendment that you discussed, and that's why when we discussed this bill with you, that had much more flexibility going forward, was you not only now said you want authority for Sinlaku, but you want other disasters to be included. That's why I said I'm going to advocate for you clawing back the 14 million that currently is in a governor's account that you can use, correct?
Yeah.
That was your amendment and your request,
Yes.
and this bill also takes care of Sinlaku, correct?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Senator Lujan, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Madam Speaker and Mr. Dengaro. It's upsetting to hear that there was no transitioning between individuals and your new management team. What was the condition? Did the previous individuals that held those positions, did they give their standard 2-week notices, or did they abruptly leave, or were they abruptly given notice to vacate? Because if they gave their standard 2 weeks, you should have had a transition period.
No, so the superintendent is basically, even as soon as the board has hired me, but not to go into effect until, the end of the contract of the superintendent, which was December of last year, because he's appointed, all of his deputies are appointed, and he basically told his deputies that they're all unclassified and that they were all appointed by him. So when his term ends on December 31st, their term would also end on December 31st. But it wasn't 2 weeks notice, it was like a couple of months maybe notice, and inform them as well that they could apply for any of the deputy positions.
Okay, so they were given enough time. It just
Yes.
there wasn't. Okay, got it. Okay, and I see you're still the acting. How much longer are you going to be acting?
Well, hopefully tonight at the board meeting. So our legal counsel personally had a conversation with the acting AG to go through everything to be very specific in what it is that they want us to do. So they wanted us to advertise and follow the open government law. They want us to put it in our website. They want to put it on a regular portal. They want to put it also in our agenda and be specific. And in addition, I'm even providing the contract just in case for anyone who wants to look at it. So
Okay.
hopefully
No,
tonight that would happen, and then we would send all the documents, including the minutes.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that you're in a position that you can sign off on things and it's not challenged down the line, because you're still in an acting position and all that. So everything is
Yes.
good. Okay, and hopefully tonight the acting will be removed from the.
No, next week, I guess,
Next week.
because I will
Next
have to give them all the documents.
Okay. To put on what Senator Tello had asked, but do you have a formal payment policy in place now with your new team in place that requires bills that be paid in the first in, first out basis? And if not, will one be implemented?
So we have implemented new guidelines, the accounts payable. We've had some problems with some DOE employees receiving invoices from a contractor, kind of squirreling it away in their desk to get to it next week or something and forgetting, and it's been very painful. So what the guidance that has gone out to all of our contractors is, if you want to be paid for the work or the material that you've provided, provide your invoice, attach it to an email, and send it to accountspayable@gdoe.net. That comes into the DFAS arena, if you will. It gets on my radar. Now, my people will record that as a liability. We need to get on the books that we owe somebody some money, and then we contact the end user who actually requested that services or that material and say, validate it and verify it. Once the invoices come to us, we hand it out, it's validated and verified. Our accounts payable have guidance to pay it within 3 work days. If not, they have to come to the DFAS and explain why it cannot be paid in 3 work days. So yes, we put provisions in place.
Well, thank you for that, because actually my next question kind of answered it, but you know, you said if invoices are given to someone and they put in their desk and all that, right? And so my question is, again, if there are deviations from the first in, first out, if that should occur, you know, what criteria or exceptions are granted and who approves them? Because, you know, if it came to my desk and I forgot, I put it there, but the date was January 1st, and that was really first in, is before the March invoice, and so who approves that? And because it was my fault that I didn't give it to you, but it's not the vendor's fault because they submitted on time, so who approves that exception?
So when something is found, if you will, if an invoice that was squirreled away was found, it's presented and it's been verified and validated, it doesn't go to the end of the list. It's at the top of the list. Especially, we feel the pain for those that have been waiting and waiting. So they almost go to the top of the list. But they're not going to be further penalized by, oh, we found it, now we verified, now you go to the end of the list. That's not the case. We understand, and we're very sympathetic to the fact that many of the vendors are small businesses and they have payrolls to meet. So I mentioned it before, I just want to say it again. Within the first 30 days of us coming on board, we liquidated the accounts payable by 89% for the local vendors, and we have maintained that pace. So we are paying our vendors, especially our local vendors, and people are starting to do more business with us than they were before. So things are healing.
Great, yeah, because I was going to say, if you can provide us with the current aging report of all payables broken down by vendor amount and number of days outstanding.
Be glad to do that, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Negro. And last question actually is, what's your plan to bring all outstanding balances current, and what timeline do you give yourselves for that?
Well, one of the things I have to say is we have some restrictions on prior year lapses. So if the restrictions or the ability to hold, if the money becomes available to us, we will address immediately any of the outstanding accounts that we have to pay for. I want to mitigate, there are a few exceptions in that sense, that there was some software that was purchased and it was a double purchase accidentally. So now you have to figure out, okay, how do we work with that? Well, I've delved into it, and I've come to find out, although it was a double purchase, $380,000, the licenses are upgradable. So we can actually, when we get to that, we can upgrade it to the latest version of Windows and put it on laptops or whatever we might buy and salvage that double purchase, if you will. That takes a little time. But so anything that's on our outstanding right now either has a little issue like that. We have some money to the retirement system because we in the retirement system are negotiating what's the proper payment. Once that negotiation is resolved, it will be paid. So I can more or less say 99% of what's in our accounts payable is either current or within 30 days, or there's an issue that we're working through. We are paying our bills, and the contractors and vendors appreciate it.
Thank you for that. And one last question, and thank you for pointing this out when you first came in regards to the double session at JFK, where you know, I guess the still the legal owner of the school, was charging twice because you had two schools there. Was that resolved, and did we get that one down to one billing? Because it was suffice that that the one payment is for a whole day as opposed to half a day. I mean, so is that resolved?
I will say that you're absolutely right, and I will say that it's a work in progress because I have made inquiries as to the authorization levels for this double payment, if you will, and who's authorized it. It's one thing to have an authorization document that is legal, binding, valid, and that was a poor choice, but we have to honor it. But that is not the case. I have not been able to locate that magic document that says we should be paying. There's discussions with me that we saw this or I saw that document, but I don't have it. So that's like in a court of law, that's hearsay. And for a financial guy, I need to see the document, legitimate signatures. I do not have that. So I've actually asked for help from the auditors because we're going to dig deeper. And right now, my feeling is it wasn't authorized legally, formally, and that if that's the case, the money that was paid should be looked at as being a reimbursement. But, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a judge, but I can tell you this, no further payments are being made until this is resolved.
Well, thank you for that, because it doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, and even if you had 3 schools using that, I mean, does that mean you're gonna play 3 times? But anyway, thank you for catching that, and thank you for your management and leadership, and we look forward to working closely with you folks and in the days and months to come. But thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Masi, Senator Lujan. Senator Barnett, you're recognized.
Sijus Masi, Mr. Chair, Manana Sijus, Acting Superintendent Wampad, and Mr. Leon Guerrero. If I may, because it was brought up by the chair, can I start with a question on the PTO funding? This is funding, I believe, that was provided through my amendment to the budget bill 2 cycles back. It provided $205,000. Is this funding still available? Because some PTOs have asked me if it's available because they're trying to go through the paperwork required at Rev and Tax so they can become legitimate nonprofit and avail of the funding.
I can tell you that that is...
Apparently that there is a set-aside funding in the cash account. So that means the money is still available.
Okay, thank you for that. And then as we discussed the bill, I just for the benefit of the viewing public, wanted to go through the timeline of what necessitated the need for this bill and also for my bill 284, which I introduced on March 6th. So back during the budget cycle, the Chair of Education proffered an amendment that restricted the use of your lapses to just playgrounds and sports facilities. Which, we support. There was an intent to provide funding for playgrounds with some of the ARP funding, but I think it got lost in the shakeup with some of these change orders. So, of course we want playgrounds. Our public school kids are running around a field of grass. But at the time, I and several of my colleagues had argued against this amendment because I believe that it tied GDOE's hands, especially when we're talking about significant amounts of lapses to the tune of upwards of $50 million, and I had argued that this was a large amount of funding and GDOE needed the flexibility because the superintendent and his team at the time had basically said that. And so the amendment passed over the objections of, I think it was Senator Lahi, Perez, Taitigui, and I. And later we had heard the outgoing team talk about how this amendment to the budget tied their hands and prevented them from using the significant amount of lapses for things that they needed, like instructional supplies for FB Leon Guerrero, classroom equipment for a temporary Simon Sanchez classroom. So Ms. Superintendent, would you agree with that assessment of the amendment to the budget law?
Senator, okay, let me see. I don't want to get into a fight between you guys, okay? I
Just the
understand
facts,
that.
ma'am. Just the facts.
I just want to tell you from our perspective where we're coming from. If I didn't have all of these other problems that we found out when we came on board, Could I use the money that we have for all of our sports equipment? Absolutely, I could. Not having any of these things, I would go out, I'll build gyms for all of our schools, I'll buy playground equipment for all of our elementary schools. I mean, I'll do all of those things. I'll put bleachers outside, bleachers inside the gym. Trust me, I can do that. But because now that we have these other issues, I couldn't very well do that. I needed to set my priorities, and that's why, yes, the amendment definitely to continue to put, yes, sports facilities. I'm not ignoring that at all. We even added, playground equipment because several of our schools have requested for, our school principals have requested for it. But there's just a slew of items that we needed to address, and that's why I needed the amendment.
And this was exactly what I argued during the budget session. And so I just want to say what I'm seeing up here is some of my colleagues are breaking their arm to pat themselves on the back when they're really just solving a problem that they created because they couldn't get out of their own way. And had that amendment not passed, we would have seen the procurement of the supplies for FB Leon Guerrero, because we met about this, Superintendent, and you told me it was urgent. You told me it was an emergency. I believe it's urgent. I believe it's an emergency because right now, at this hour, you have families of FBLG kids sitting at home while their parents work because they don't go to class till noon. So had this amendment not passed, all of this equipment could have been procured and we could have, hopefully seen a quicker opening of FB Leon Guerrero. And so I just have to call it for what it is. We met in early March. I introduced a bill 284 that is basically word for word the same as this bill. I asked the finance chair to expedite a public hearing. He ignored my request, and we're here. And it's not about who gets the credit. I'm just saying, don't take credit for a problem that you created and you're now trying to solve in an election year. And unfortunately, there's so many families who are caught in the crossfire of this. We could have procured the equipment for the temporary Simon Sanchez classes that you're working on, and again, the equipment for FBLG with the capital improvement projects that this bill allows with that flexibility. Is it going to go towards the gym at FBLG?
Yes. Yes, as a matter of fact, it is, because we didn't anticipate it, or the previous superintendent at the time, when they had provided a funding source to just address the facility, they didn't do the gym because the gym was fine. But when Mawar hit, of course, that's when it damaged the gym, and now we have to include the gym. I mean, I could waive, of course, the PE for whatever time frame until such time they will get money to repair it. But because now that these funds, are available for us to do it, I've included it as one of the plans then to continue the refurbishment of FB.
Well, obviously, I think that it's very clear that you need this flexibility to be able to spend those lapses, significant lapses, which, if this bill or my bill hadn't been entertained, I mean, we would be looking at, $50 million for playgrounds and sports facilities. That's a little much, unless we're talking about diamond-coated playgrounds. And so the flexibility needed that's provided with this, I think it's late. Frankly, this shouldn't have passed in the budget. I think the arguments that our colleagues presented were very compelling relative to what you yourself said this morning was the tying of GDOE's hands. And so I think it's just exercises like this that, really erode the trust of the people of Guam and the students and the families at FB Leon Guerrero who, I've waited. My son went through 6th, 7th, 8th grade. He's now in high school. Now my other son is in 6th grade, and we're hoping that they can just get back to GGO, because this place is, almost an impossible burden on our families. And I don't want any of our colleagues or our superintendent to lose sight of that simple fact, is that, we have students waiting at home right now because they can't go to school. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. So if you look at the list, of course, and I'm not saying it's a final list, but there have been many requests from the other division heads to be able to use the 51 million. If you look at the list, I've basically told everyone that this is a one-time amount of monies that we have, and it's not going to occur again. We're not going to have ARP, we're not going to have ARA, we're not going to have ESF, and and I'm sure we're not going to have lapses at all. We're talking about a deficit. So all of these items that are listed here are basically something that's where it's more permanent one time. There was a request to take $5 million out of this for me to go and hire 160 one-to-one school aides. And I said I couldn't do that because that cannot be sustained. That means I spend it now, $4 or $5 million. Next year in my next budget, will I have $4 to $5 million to sustain that? I can't guarantee that. Only you can. So to be on the safe side, the list that I have here is something that's more structural, something that's going to be more permanent, and something that I don't have to come back next year in my next budget to request for that funding source again to sustain that program.
Correct. And further clarification, so we stay with the entitlement to facts. When you met with me, Madam Superintendent, as well as Finance Chair, just a short couple of weeks ago, you were still uncertain about the 52 million because of your internal audit, correct? In terms of it being available. I need you on the record for that, sir.
That's correct.
And it's still, actually, we are getting further clarification to ensure that we can expend those funds, correct?
That's correct.
And the 23 million that we know in lapses that actually exist had already been committed for other projects, correct?
Well, we have a ton of projects including, yes, that's correct.
So if we're talking about first in, first out, it's actually now the availability of these funds that allows us to pass this bill and allowed you to expend it, correct?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Because, and I know the Chair of Education will close with this, we did not anticipate during the time that the amendment was passed, the 52 million, as well as the possibility of up to the 23 million that ended up becoming available, and that's the reason for this change. As the superintendent said, there were many other, and there still exist, many sports facility programs that need to be taken care of. But of course, with this corpus of funding, it's a much different story in terms of, also, one more time, Mr. Leon Guerrero, because I think some of our colleagues aren't hearing a lot of your fourth presentation now of what you took over. When you came in, you found invoices not paid to contractors, correct?
Absolutely.
To include those change orders for FB, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Because those are actually what was discovered that was not turned over, and also with the chair, because this clarification is so important as the chair of finance, when we met several times with the old crew, they were the ones who are uncertain whether or not they were going to use funds. We gave them other opportunities for different funding to be able to go forward with change orders on contracts. They never pulled the trigger. So they dropped that in your lap when you came in, and you ended up having to wrestle with this football.
Pick up the pieces. It's very unfortunate.
Absolutely. And that's why we're here now with this corpus of funding, which is now available for appropriation, was not going to be available during the budget because it was not understood that this reimbursement, in fact, we were on the phone to DOE with the Vice Speaker and others consistently about whether or not that reimbursement was going to come back to the government of Guam, and that was the money that was given for pay raises to the individuals in Department of Education and needed to be reimbursed to the government of Guam. Next up is Senator Perez. Senator Perez, you recognize.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think it's very clear. I mean, it's very clear that you need this money today and maybe yesterday, or maybe back when we passed the budget. And, my concern is that this delay really has put our students, especially FBLG, right? This is the money that have gone to their school, so they don't have to go through double session. Is that So my question is, if you had access to this money back in October, what is the timeline in which FBLG students can return to FBLG, their school?
Are you saying October of this year?
Sorry.
Or last year?
So that when the budget bill was passed, should, this amendment not have been included in the budget bill, you would have access to, you would have the flexibility to use funds to ensure that FBLG is, the repairs are done, so there is no double session. So I guess the question that I have is, to what extent did it delay the process, the progress with FBLG? If you had had access to the funding then versus not having it today,
Well,
how far back have you been put as far as the deadline or the progress?
Well, of course, it's unfortunate that we didn't know about the fact that, that there wasn't sufficient funding to complete FB. We didn't know about Mawarka that happened after. And we didn't know about the law until we came in. So, I mean, we can only go forward from what we have, discovered, and how the School Readiness Task Force, who's been meeting on a weekly basis, have addressed this and provided to management what needed to be done to not just get FBLG and Simon Sanchez, but the other schools all ready for the opening of the new school year.
Okay, and in regards to the contractors, they're saying that we have to pay money because of the delay. Is that correct? If you can correct me, Franklin, what's the situation with the contractors not getting paid on time? What kind of additional, I guess what's the...
There's late fee requests and interest on late fees.
Okay, and how much is that equal to?
Approximately 1.2 million.
Okay, so, the bare minimum, if we had access to that funding, in let's say January was when you came in, and you found out all of this, we wouldn't have to pay this 1.5 million. So that's the cost of the errors that was made with the budget bill.
If the 1.2 million may not have accrued, because if we paid immediately, that was delayed costs.
Right.
So paying it up front, we wouldn't have accrued that 1.2 million.
Yeah, but at least when you came in, you would have put a stop to that. And so, I mean, it's really clear this bill should have been, needs to be, we need to make this correction in the budget bill so we don't have to pay these costs. We could have avoided these costs, I feel, if the budget bill wasn't...
Yeah, if you go back to October of last year when we weren't here yet, but had things been done a little differently and the money been, the restrictions been lifted at that time, the procurement cycle could have started last October.
Okay, and then...
But right now, we're constrained in that sense. So the procurement cycle is the procurement cycle.
Correct. So we've lost 6 months, about half a year of progress. Can we make up the time if we were to have an emergency session?
It's a number one priority.
Okay.
And we're eternally hopeful, but it's the number one priority. Just waiting. We have the procurement waiting in the wings right now to engage. All we need is the restriction lifted.
Okay, and you're waiting for this bill to pass?
Yes.
Okay. So, I think, that's really reason to have an emergency session to correct this problem, correct the budget bill, because, our next session is in May. And the sooner we can get this through, the better. It's obviously, it's obvious that you guys need this money, and it's unfortunate that mistake happened. So that's just, my concern as far as the deficit. So what is the deficit due to that you project, and how much are we talking about as far as deficit?
We have some preliminary analysis from our internal audit on that, but we don't have the final number. And one of the reasons is because there's a journey of discovery, and more invoices from contractors are coming to light that we did not know about. Bills that weren't paid for 4 years are coming to light. So, and in that particular case, the one I'm talking about right now for 4 years is 20,000, which, in the scheme of things, isn't a huge amount of money, but the question becomes how many more bills are waiting in the shadows, so we have invoices, so we have to figure it out as we go on. Now, having said that, I want to also say that we're taking steps now to ensure that going forward, that does not continue to happen. There were not enough checks and balances in place, and superintendent has taken strong measures to ensure this doesn't happen again. But we have to, we don't know what we don't know. How many other contractors can say, you failed to pay me in a timely manner? I don't know.
Okay, I guess we will definitely keep up, if you can provide that information so that we are updated. There is another bill that's been heard and, you know, it's waiting in the wings that could provide more funding, and this would be sustainable funding to DOE. I just need to talk to the chair to ensure that this gets on the session agenda. It's Bill 126-38. It does, the source of funding is from use tax. You know, right now use tax is not performing the best as it could, but at least it's something to help you guys, and I just hope we can get that on the agenda. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I hope to speak with you further on that one. Thank you.
Jesus Masi, we are here on Bill 306-38. Thank you. So my question once again, let's be clear. You told me a couple weeks ago that you would not have spent this $51 million until you get clarification, correct?
That's correct.
So you didn't lose time on the $51 million?
We did not lose time on the $51 million.
Thank you very much.
Spend it. This is a prior year lapses.
Correct. Senator Montanani, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the clarification, I think for the fourth time now. I think a lot of times, this is what happens here in the legislature, we have different senators saying one thing and just trying to confuse people, but I think it's clear, it's on the record, what's happening. And I also just want to say that I sympathize with this new leadership in terms of this lack of transition, because that's what happened when the 38th Guam legislature, this new majority came in to the Guam legislature. There wasn't any transition, really. Matter of fact, we didn't really even have computers or internet, but yet we're blamed for not being able to process bills on day one. So I understand that you guys inherited a mess, and I appreciate the leadership of the committee chair on education with constantly communicating with you and trying to find real solutions instead of, and as I've said before, just give out sound bites. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Usmasi, Senator Montanani. To close on Bill 309-38, Senator Borja, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, colleagues, for today's discussion. You know, since we're trying to clear the record and put on the record on why we're here today, and since we're giving credit where credit is due, let's offer again some history. Again, colleagues, today we're going in circles about this amendment and pointing fingers at the amendment being the problem of FBLG. But to remind the public and the listening audience, the problem of FBLG existed way before I came into this legislature. We're not sitting here because my amendment shut down FBLG, or we're not sitting here because my amendment took years for FBLG to get where it is today. Our commitment still stands the same. We're committed to working with the Department of Education to ensure that their bills get paid, to ensure that FBLG gets open, to continue to push that the field and the sports facilities become a priority, because again, this is a priority these are issues that have existed for the last 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Again, I'm not here to take credit. I'm not here to pat myself on the back. So if any of my colleagues would like to be patted on the back and need credit, I'd like to give a few minutes or a few seconds for them to be recognized so that because for me, it's not even about that. Again, like always, I'm here to support. I'm a professional first before I'm a politician. I'm here to do whatever it is we need to do to help the agencies that we're here to support. And for the record, again, the $54 million or the $51 million, which again, we're still not sure whether or not we can use. We're still waiting on an interpretation. And again, one more time, at the time of the amendment, during the budget bill, and again, the problem of FBLG existed way before that amendment. We were expecting 11 million. Even right now, based on what was discussed today, was that there was only $3 million that was sent back. All these other lapses, again, are lapses that have come up after the fact. And, thank you again to the budget chair for working with the Department of Education and working with our committee to ensure that we get the spend plan that was approved by the board, which we had asked Dr. Wampat in January when she first came in and said she needed an amendment. We did not get that, and also we did not get that list until maybe 3-4 weeks ago, which is fine because again, we allowed them the opportunity to continue to do their assessments based on the transition. And so again, thank you colleagues for the discussion, and thank you Mr. Chair, and thank you GDOE, Dr. Okada for joining us today, and thank you colleagues.
Susmasi, Senator Borja. Thank you, Superintendent and Speaker Wampat for being here. Mr. Leon Guerrero, continue the great work you're doing at the Department of Education. And that will conclude the hearing on Bill 309-38 COR. We now move to Bill 306-38 COR, introduced by Vice Speaker V. Anthony Ada. Vice Speaker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, Bill 306-38 COR is an act to add a new Article 15, Chapter 77, Title 12, Guam Code Annotated, relative to tax credits for the development of affordable housing units. And Mr. Chair, one of the most significant things that the government of Guam does to make housing construction expensive is to apply the business privilege taxes to construction contractors. Since assuming the role of oversight chair of housing, I come to find that Guam is the only U.S. jurisdiction that applies an excise tax to all construction contractors. Some states, such as Oregon, may impose a 1% excise tax on high-end or commercial projects and use the proceeds to fund affordable housing projects. Guam's BPT on housing construction contracts is likely the most regressive excise tax on affordable housing in the country. Bill 309-38 COR provides BPT tax credits for developers and contractors to build housing projects that are targeted to those between the 50 and 150% of the Guam area median income as determined by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. It's my hope that this bill will be one of the many tools that the government of Guam can deploy to build homes for both first-time homeowners and those seeking low-cost rental units. I look forward to the public testimony on Bill 309-38 and my colleagues as well. Thank you.
Sidus Masi, Vice Speaker, and we do have Mr. Carlos Camacho offering testimony from Arizona today via Zoom. And he's beginning his evening, maybe later evening now. We'll go ahead and begin with his testimony. We'll take a short recess to make sure the Zoom feed is set. 30-second recess. That was the fastest 30 seconds in history. Mr. Carlos Camacho from Arizona, you're looking great. Please proceed with your testimony on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Ada, Vice Speaker Ada, and thank you the rest of the colleagues who are there. When I saw this bill, I'm going to recommend some amendments if you don't mind, but when I saw this bill, I wanted to let you guys understand what this bill is targeting is exactly for the last 30 years I've been doing business in Guam for all my low-income housing stuff, is every time a family comes to me, they said, Mr. Camacho, how come I can't qualify for that project you're doing? Well, these are the federal restriction under low-income housing tax credit that it has to meet a certain area median income, and in those cases, 60% area median income and below. And that was a program that I brought into Guam in 2005, almost 21 years ago. Today, that program, which is not related, I just want to give the history, that program yielded over almost 1,600 units combined by 2 different contractors. And now GURA has further promoted this program, and there's other contractors that are interested, and I'm glad that that's happening. So again, that's targeted to the low income. So what can we do to help the middle class income? I know for a fact in this bill, there are 2 sources of funds that will attract it. First is the 4% redirect BPT from whoever the contractor is that's building the project. Second we were asking if a 6% set aside annually on this bill, it capped the total development at 100 million. What that means is there may be several contractors or developer doing a 20 million, 20 million, 20 million, or one at 10 million, 10 million, whatever the variable is. It caps the project at 100 million so that the only tax exposure and the tax credit will be maximum of $6 million, 6% of that. And I want to make very clear that after reading these proposed resources for this project, over 30 years ago, I did, again, just for the record, I helped Senator Tony Lamarena, at that time when he was the senator in this August body. We introduced the first affordable housing qualifying certificate, which is in the books at GITA right now for the last 30-some years. That is a proven method, right? Unfortunately, that bill that was passed over 25, 30, or 30-some years ago provided a cap that it is only available to developers or contractors that have done a minimum of 25 homes or more. So in my testimony that I submitted, I'm not going to read it, I'm just doing everything from memory now. In my testimony I submitted that if the body and the sponsor of this bill can work with GITA, and other than redirecting the BPT from a contractor to the developer, and I know the reason I was kind of cautious about that, I've been around the block a lot. I know the bond covenants with GITA has very restrictive use of any BPT, right? Because they secured 3 of the 4% to their bond covenant, and if they keep hitting away from losing a BPT from any other new bill, then it'll be a very difficult milestone to deliver. So one of my recommendations is to convert the redirect and direct BPT to a QC program, which is already in the books of Government Guam and GITA. The other recommendation I have on that QC is right now it says up to 25 units. If you guys don't mind, there's a lot of small contractors out there that can do a 5-unit, a 10-unit development, right? They're not one of the big boys, right? But we want to avail that program, and I put that in my testimony, that if GITA can consider amending that 25 minimum QC development to allow the smaller contractor. And as you all know, the smaller the contractor, lower overhead, right? They don't have the big overhead like our big contractors. I got nothing against that, but when you got a big overhead, then your costs to build a home is a lot higher. But when you avail this to the smaller contractors, they don't have big overheads, and it can be competitive in pricing. Not only that, GITA about a year ago took some of their SSBCI money. That's the one that was brought in from the IRS to Guam, and they promoted a bonding program for small contractors. That was one of the lacking resources for these small contractors. So they worked, GITA worked, and the insurance company that won the bid is the Moylan's Insurance, and they were working out the details, and that bonding capacity is GITA securing the SSBCI, but they can clarify that if I'm saying the acronym wrong, and those small contracts now has access to bonding. That's why I would rather convert that into a QC instead of a redirect, so we don't violate the bond covenants, and the QC to be amended for smaller contractors to avail on this program, so they can provide a more competitive construction cost when they do decide to opt in this program. On regards to the 6%, I know this is a touchy situation. I looked at all the tax credit bills historically in Guam, and I got nothing against them. They're very good tax credit. They're very good social tax credit program. When I say social, some tax credit was given to the Raceway Park to develop that for that type of organization. Some was given to the Soccer Association. Some was given to the Guam Football Association so that they can build their facility so that our youngest families and kids can have access to these food facility. The difference on this tax credit that I support is that it is an economic multiplier. If you recall in this bill, I think they capped the development at 100 million a year. If you just take that formula, depending on who applies for it, 5 contracts at 20 million, for example, So the most GITA will give out is $6 million. If you take $6 million divided by the amount of funds to be developed, it is a 9-to-1 multiplier effect. So for every $1 that was infused into that $6 million, it returns back 9 times and circulating to our economy. This, and here's the best thing about this, what I saw in the bill, that they will not give the $6 million tax credit until there is escrow closing, loan closing. That way they ignite the funding source that it's a real deal. So they ain't going to give the tax credit. The contractor who is doing the project will not avail from the QC until loan closing. That's one of the conditions that GITA is going to oversee, that they will make sure that that will be the vehicle and to, as one of the conditions to make sure they issue it if there's funds available. Because I know that you guys, the team here, I mean, this August body, of course, every time I watch in all your public hearings and budget session, there's always, how do you find money from A to B? What this $6 million is going to do is going to provide, if you look at my testimony later, is going to provide an economic multiplier. The contractor who got the 4% off, yes, he will get the 4. But when he buys the concrete from Hawaiian Rock or Smith Bridge, when he buys the windows and doors from Home Depot or Choice Builders or JK Tile or Benson's, those guys too pay BPT. This bill doesn't waive those guys. It just waives the first layer of the contractor. So that's the economic flow that it goes through. And that's why I wanted to make that statement clear. So it's a tax credit that provides a economic multiplier and an approval. Now, how do we secure that this goes to the middle class income? In this bill, I saw that they put a deed restriction. It's called a land use restriction agreement, very similar to what we do in our low-income housing tax credit. Our tax credit from the low income comes from the IRS, but they require that we have a deed restriction administered by GURA for 15 years. That's because our tax credit, typically in our dollar for dollar project, comes in at 80 to 90 cents to the dollar. We get a bigger tax credit infusion from the IRS, right? So that's why they do a longer tax credit compliance. But what GURA is doing now, they extended that to 30 years because it's competitive now. There's a lot of more developers looking at it. And if you want to give a sustainable, affordable housing to low income and you go for 30 years, then you get a higher point on your scoring points. And that's a good program that GURA is doing to sustain affordable housing. On this one here, for the middle class, the bill recommended a 10-year deed restriction, targeting to the area median income of up to 150%. Now, that 150% is provided by HUD, FHA, because Guam and like Hawaii, we are defined as a difficult development area. Because we're defined by that DDA status by the federal government, they bumped up the ratio that used to be up to 120 to 150. Knowing the reason they did that is because our cost of goods, like for Hawaii and Guam, and through the Jones Act and many other reasons, tariff, like Hawaii's going to be hit by the tariffs when their goods come in, and just like Guam. And then, as you guys have been seeing, all these military projects is causing the inflation of costs going up. So these are the reason why they bumped up the 120% AMI to 150. And for that, if any one of the senators want to confirm that, they can verify that under FHA's website on one of their mortgage letters. And that mortgage letter was in December 2025 when they bumped up the area median income. So this all has the restriction. It has the deed restriction for the property where it will not apply to a developer doing a $600,000 home, right, and get these benefits. These are restricted for the targeted demographics, what we call the missing middle. So on a short narrative, my submission would be part of the record, and the recommended QC would be part of my record. But I'm just giving you my overall narrative right now, because
Okay, we've lost the feed, but it looks like Mr. Carlos was wrapping up, so I'm sure we'll bring him back for any questions. We'll consider that having heard Mr. Carlos for now, Carlos Camacho, and we'll proceed with the rest who have signed in. So what I have is Fernando Esteves, Senator. I guess you have oral and your testimony on this. Edith Pangilinan, are you doing oral or just support? Okay. Mary Guerrero, just support. Okay. Liz Duenas, you're doing oral testimony. Please come forward. Antoinette Leon Guerrero, are you reading Gita's testimony? Please come forward. Chairman Florig, are you testifying or just in support? Okay. And of course, we had Carlos Camacho. So we will proceed now on the order of sign-in. Senator Fernando Esteves, you're recognized at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, Vice Speaker, members of the legislature. My name is Fernando Esteves, Deputy Director at GURA, testifying in my official capacity. Currently, in the current language of the bill, we are opposed but supportive of the intent and would be supportive with amendments to make it effective. Specifically, and I apologize, I'm not submitting written testimony. We only saw the bill yesterday, but we did want to make sure that we came down to provide testimony. And so moving through the legislative intent and going straight to proposed section 771501 under definitions, we recommend, if the target is for the missing middle, to kind of be clarify what it is we're targeting and who we're targeting, especially if we're going to be looking at, in the future, maximizing the benefit of this credit and having developers maybe leverage federal programs and other federal sources to expand on housing development. Affordable housing has a very specific definition, which is no more than 30% of a household's gross household income spent on housing needs to include shelter costs. And as we've referred to in our housing summit, if we are looking at legislation targeting the middle class, perhaps we should call it something different, like attainable housing. That way people don't get their wires crossed on what that is. We don't oppose the definition and the range provided. Generally, middle income or moderate income by HUD's definition would be those above 80% of the area median income. The threshold of lower than 80% still falls in the low income, and they would still qualify for many programs and grants that are available. So, if you consider a range of 80 to 150, but we wouldn't be opposed to, a lower amount, but maybe clarifying that 50%, that 50 percentile are not middle income. They still very much fall in the low income category. If I could, Mr. Camacho made a couple of key points. The LIHTC program, Low Income Housing Tax Credit, has been the most successful program on Guam and nationally for putting more affordable units out. And I do recognize that the design of this is very much similar to the original affordable housing QC that's on the books. But if you just look at the data, that has not been an effective program of applying more affordable housing to the island. The other part to really consider is that the bill talks about the who and who we're trying to target, and it's talking about the what is the benefit, but the benefit is only provided to the developer. Now, if you look at what the low-income housing tax credit does, there's both a benefit to the developer and a benefit to the person being housed. I'm not talking about homes developed for sale. I'm talking about rental units. And so with the low-income housing tax development, you have the who, which is the targeted demographic, and you have the what, which is the tax credit provided to the developer, and you have the for. And the for is a rent, I don't like to use the word rent cap, but a rent control based on the income of the individual. So the income targeting gets them in the door, right? And what keeps them there is the rental rate, right? And we're not even proposing for an affordable rental rate. If you recall from our housing summit, this is one of our 12 policy points and recommendations for the legislature. Based on the data, we think a 40% rent cap is more than reasonable, which means that a developer cannot charge more than 40% of the household's gross median income. And if you look at this being targeted for the middle income, those are not bad rates. So for a family of four in the 150% area median income, that's $3,000 a month. You cannot charge them more than that on rent. But the idea is that when you have that income spectrum, is that balances out both the cost of operations and profit motive of the developer to maintain the project or development and still have people in there, but it also balances the income or the rental cost for everybody in the development, so you have a true mixed income development going on. And so, that slight bump from those of higher AMI percentiles will balance out those that are just coming into the market, increasing their earnings, so those of the 80% or 90% area median income. And so, the main issue is that if you're going to compare this at all to LIHTC, it's an apples and oranges comparison unless you apply the rental restriction. And again, it would only be for the term of the land use restriction. So if you were to apply it, they were to get the 10% credit, 6% credit, the restriction would only be for that period of time, right? So after that, they can do whatever they want. But right now, there's no control. So what we're basically saying is any developer can come in and get a QC, right? But they can charge $1 for the rent, or they can charge 1,000% of the market rental, right? So there's no defined benefit to a renter. We might as well just give tax credits to any developer and just, give it back, right? Because there's really no benefit to the public in that respect. The other concern that I would have would be, while the intent is in line with 21 GCA, right, with regarding real property use and subdivisions, it doesn't really close the loophole, right? So we're saying more than 4 units, because more than 4 units, you have to do a subdivision, right? Ideally, I'm guessing that's the intent and that's the vision for single-family housing development, but that still doesn't acknowledge the loophole on parental subdivisions. And so there could be some enforcement in there that the tax credit is given at the time of final design, or it could be Gita maybe can handle that, but that's a key distinction so that they don't avoid putting in the necessary civil work that's required for developments. Lastly, make sure it's lastly, quick on the definition under, my apologies, proposed section 771502 B. So I would recommend, if you're going to go a range below 80%, then don't use the term low to moderate income, use the term low and moderate income. If you're going to increase the range to 80%, which is the threshold from low and moderate, so if they're going to be 80 to 150, then use the term moderate income. But low to moderate income specifically means 0 to 80%. Lastly, I would highly recommend that because, and since it's just for a 10-year period, that you make sure that this provides a benefit to the public, right? And this being a state tax credit provides a unique opportunity to ensure that it maximizes the benefit of our people, which means you can put a restriction on the land use restriction to ensure that the residents, on top of being income eligible, have to be a bona fide resident of Guam, meaning they have to be a tax filer. right? The Department of War has an endless supply of money nearly. We don't need to be giving tax credits to build their housing for them. That would be the recommendation. Again, that should only be attached to the land use restriction. And so asking and saying at least, hey, we're going to give you this tax credit, we just want a reasonable rental at no more than 40% of their gross household income, and that they be a resident, a tax-filing, tax-paying resident of the island, we don't believe is unreasonable. And at least for the 10-year period that land use restriction in there, it will maximize it. We won't even say to go as far as the federal tax credit, which goes 15 to 30 years, right? We're just saying 10 years, not for us to say that's perfectly reasonable. It's for the legislature to decide on the tax credit. But if we do want to provide a benefit to the public, if we do want to help the housing crisis, those would be the key amendments that would need to be in the bill. Otherwise, we can just give the tax credit to any developer or just remove all of their BPT, whenever they develop a unit. It really doesn't make a difference. I mean, the 50 to 150 is such a broad range. It just opens it up to anybody, but doesn't provide a focused benefit on where the need is, and it's not going to actually support the missing middle, because what they need is just a little breathing room to live their lives. Thank you.
Susmasi, Senator Fernando Esteves, Deputy at Cura. Ms. Liz Duenas, you're recognized.
Okay, I have two testimonies. One is my testimony, which is oral, and I have one from the Guam Association of Realtors, which was prepared by Monty McDowell, our chairperson for our Government Affairs Committee. I'll just read the testimony. Guam is facing serious housing challenge. Working families, young professionals, first-time homebuyers, and many members of our community are finding it increasingly difficult to afford a home or rental unit. The cost of land and construction materials, labor, shipping, financing, and basic development has made housing less attainable for young people who keep our island moving forward. Bill 30638 provides a practical and much-needed tool to help address this problem. The bill recognizes Guam as a high-cost area and proposes incentives to encourage the private sector to build and rehabilitate affordable housing for families earning between 50 and 150% of Guam's area median income. This is especially important for the missing middle, families who may not qualify for traditional housing assistance but still can afford today's housing prices. I support this bill because it encourages the development of both single-family and multi-family housing while requiring affordability to be maintained through land use restriction agreements. These agreements help ensure that the benefit of this program reaches Guam families and remains in place for a meaningful period of time. The bill also takes a balanced approach by including oversight through the Guam Economic Development Authority, reporting requirements, and an annual cap on tax credits. These safeguards are important because they promote housing development while maintaining fiscal responsibility and accountability. Affordable housing is not only a social need, it is also an economic development issue. When new homes are built, Guam benefits through construction jobs, engineering, architectural work, and increased demand for local services and feature real property tax revenue. The supporting materials for Bill 30638 note that the program could help support the development of approximately 300 to 350 homes or housing units each year, depending on market conditions and project mix. This bill offers a responsible partnership between public and private sectors. It does not simply identify the housing problem, it creates a mechanism to help solve it. By making affordable housing more feasible, the bill also helps increase supplies, stabilize housing costs, and expand opportunities for the home ownership and rental housing across Guam. For these reasons, we support that the bill be passed. I also want to, over the years, I've come before you to testify on different issues, and we've always talked about affordable housing. And it was always talk Now, this is a step forward. I think it's making a difference for the BPT and the tax credit that you're going to give. My biggest concern when I discussed this with Carlos, so where does that put our local developers? Most of them out there are doing 2, 3, 4 homes. And so I was talking to Carlos saying, you know, this is all talk, theory. What does it mean? So he actually put together numbers because I want to see what does that mean? How does that affect the developer and how does that affect the consumer? So when he put that on paper, then I could see, okay, it just means that the advantage is reducing the normal. If you're putting a house on the market for $500,000, for example, it will reduce that cost for the consumer, yet the developer gets a credit, a tax credit. So I thought, okay, that's great. Now, application, taking theory and applying it. Carlos has been one gentleman who, in terms of tax benefits, he was able to navigate through the federal program. Federal programs, he was able to get programs to build affordable housing. And this was a number of years ago. And I applaud him because I think he's the only one that I know of that navigated through that quagmire of paperwork and federal bureaucracy to actually put it in place, and he built the homes. And through that program, they were able to, I guess, 20% of the infrastructure was credited, and he was able to build the project. And I was always talking about if only we could get that sort of tax credit for the infrastructure. So this is not 20%, but at least it's a step forward. And taking it from the bill, actual implementation, and whatever modifications that are needed to move it forward, I applaud you guys. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Ms. Liz Duenas. Antoinette, you're recognized at this time.
Half a day. My name is Antoinette Leon Guerrero, Compliance Manager for the Guam Economic Development Authority, and I'm here today to read written testimony of Christina Tina Garcia, CEO and Administrator of the Guam Economic Authority, to the Committee on Finance and Government Operations. Hafaday Senator Chris Duenas and members of the Committee on Finance and Government Operations, thank you for the opportunity to provide this testimony on Bill 306-38, the Act to add a new Article 15, Chapter 77, Title 12, Guam Code Annotated, relative to the tax credit for the development of affordable housing units. The Guam Economic Development Authority, GEDA, has reviewed Bill 306-38 and supports the legislature's intent to provide the development of affordable housing units, but state that benefits already exist in the Qualifying Certificate Program, specifically 58127-6 of Chapter 58, Division 2 of 12 GCA, under the title of the Development of Affordable Housing. Under the current QC program, the following are benefits afforded to a developer, contractor, or subcontractor or a combination of two or more. The benefits from the construction of at least 25 affordable housing units include a rebate of 100% of all income tax paid from the construction of affordable housing for a period not to exceed 20 consecutive years under Section 58128-5. There is also a provision for development of fewer than 25, but not less than 5 affordable housing units as follows: a rebate of 100% of all income tax paid from the construction of affordable housing for a period not to exceed 20 consecutive years under Section 58128-5, up to 100% of use tax exemption with respect to constructing, furnishing, and equipping each new affordable housing units, which shall be claimed no later than 1 year from issuance of the unit's housing occupancy permit under Section 58127-7A. Affordably, when used in the QC law, is defined as 130% and less of median income average threshold as published annually by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The law states that the threshold establishes may be adjusted by Guam Housing Corporation in consultation with GITA. GITA wholly recommends we keep the benefit here and not add the tax credit program. Bill 306-38 specific comments. GITA has reviewed Bill 306-38 and the legislature's intent to provide the development of housing units to establish a one-time 10% tax credit for qualified developers who comply with the land use restrictive agreement in the construction of affordable housing units. The measure appropriately targets household earnings between 50% and 150% of Guam's area median income, addressing the critical missing medium segment of our housing market. As currently structured, the proposed tax credit is financed through two distinct mechanisms. 4% funded through the redirection of business privilege tax by the contractor recipient, and 6% funded through tax credit issued by the government of Guam, subject to annual aggregate cap of $10 million per fiscal year. GITA supports the underlying policy objective of expanding Guam's affordable housing inventory. However, a full program utilization as suggested would reduce deposits to the general fund with potential implications of the deficit reduction rainy day fund and the government of Guam bond covenants. Accordingly, GITA has identified two substantive concerns that materially affect the fiscal integrity and administrative workability of the program. Concern 1, protection of the BPT-backed bond covenants. To safeguard the government of Guam's outstanding BPT-backed bond obligation and preserve the pledged revenue stream relied upon by bondholders, GITA recommends that 3% of the 4% BPT authorized under Section 771504 shall be restricted and set aside for the government of Guam's BPT bond payments or debt service. Only the remaining 1% of the 4% BPT should be made available to redirection to qualified developers, allowing the full 4% BPT to be redirected without restriction would reduce the pledged revenue base securing the outstanding bonds. This could constitute an impairment of bond covenants and may expose the government of Guam to significant financial risks, including potential technical default, credit rating downgrade, and of the trigger of accelerating maturity provisions. Concern 2, ambiguity of the 6% credit funding source. Section 771503A2 currently reads, the remaining 6% of the total 10% tax credit shall be funded through any tax credit issued by the government of Guam, subject to annual cap established by this article. As drafted, the phrase any tax credit issued by the government of Guam is ambiguous and presents several administrative and physical risks. Unidentified revenue source, the bill does not specify which tax revenue stream will fund the 6% credit. BPT, income tax, use tax, hotel occupancy tax, or real property tax. Inability to accurately forecast. Without a clear identifying funding source, the Bureau of Budget and Management Research cannot reliably project revenue impact, model offsets, or measure program against the Section 77103 General Fund Reserve Cap. Impaired certificate issuance and monetization. In the absence of a designated funding source, the credit certificate cannot be properly scored against the revenue stream, limiting GITA's ability to issue certificate with assurance that the recipient may effectively modify them. GITA supports the policy aimed by Bill 306-30H, which seeks to expand Guam's affordable housing supply from the missing middle. Through a structured and capped tax credit program tied to the enforceability Lura covenant, GITA supports its contingent on two amendments stated above essentially to fiscal discipline and program integrity without compromising the government of Guam's bond covenants, revenue forecasting, or long-term fiscal sustainability. In closing, we recommend that the language of Bill 306-38 be changed to reflect changes to the existing affordable housing QC benefits if needed. Thank you again for the opportunity to present testimony today on Bill 306-38. If you have any further questions, you may contact Christina Garcia Guida. Thank you.
Chief Masi, at this time, we'll go to the panel for questions. Senator Gumatato, you're recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the panel, and Carlos, if you're still here online, thank you for your testimony this morning. I only have a few questions, and I'm not sure if the panel can answer or even Carlos, but it goes to something that Liz mentioned earlier. How many affordable housing units have been developed based on existing qualifying certificate policies, including the section of the QC law established in 1997, authorizing developers to receive BPT abatements for adding not less than 25 affordable housing units, and the 2022 amendment authorizing similar tax incentives for developers that add not less than 5 but fewer than 25 affordable housing units, and what specific challenges, if any, have been documented by GITA regarding the effectiveness of these affordable housing tax policies. Can anyone tell the panel or the committee how many units have been developed based on this law? Or if anyone have an idea or round number?
I'm actually new to this program, but I do recall there was a project that was already completed. And at the time, you know, I don't want to say any specifics, but there was an application, but got held up in a lot of the review process that they actually finished the project before the QC could actually was approved. So I can say there was about 3 to this one contractor that built the affordable housing.
Is Carlos on the line? Can he answer that? Is he able?
But we can get more details from Gita and
yes,
send
please.
it to you.
Oh, Carlos, are you able to answer that at all? Or your approximation?
Well, I can do a mix on how many units. Like Fernando said, out of his program, they yield a lot. I mean, Fernando's program grew a yield a lot, I guess targeted to the 60% and below or 80% and below. So they yield a lot because they got a lot of federal programs. In regards to the QC, and historically since 1997, as you stated, when this was passed and introduced by Senator Tony Lamarena, they put a minimum threshold of 25. And again, if you focus on the minimum 25, there's only a few players that can do that. So I'm not going to mention the name of the applicant that got that, but he was able to develop, if you guys recall, Lada Estates, the one in Dedero, that was a government of
I'm sure he'll come back on. And what I'm getting to, Mr. Chair, is I'm trying to understand the amount of units. 29 years, and if we only have 3 subdivisions, I'm just trying to, for my own, if I'm going to support this, I want to understand exactly how much has been done in that time frame. Mr. Chair, I have just a couple more questions, and I don't know if the panel can answer this. Recognizing that we have limited supplies of land and skilled workers across the entire construction industry, to what extent have government entities, including but not limited to the Chamorro Land Trust, GITA, the Guam Housing Corporation, considered establishing pilot programs using vacant public land for affordable housing units built vertically as townhomes or other multi-family structures in an effort to maximize the number of units on smaller footprints? Maybe you can answer that, Senator.
Yes, thank you. And this is actually 2 policy points we addressed in that's still out, that's still on a due out for GURA, which is to increase, adjust the law and increase. Right now, you can't build you're limited to how tall you can build a building, and certain setback issues are still prevalent in many respects, but it does need to be looked at again. As an example, you could look at Hagåtña redevelopment, which has more lenient. They can go up to, I think, 6 stories, but up to 75 feet without having to go through a conditional use permit with the Guam Land Use Commission and go through all of that. That will definitely help. But if I may, Senator, to the point when you were talking about the effectiveness of the original QC program, I do want to highlight that what I'm talking about and why LIHTC is so successful is that it's specifically geared towards multifamily rental housing. And so there's a benefit to the developer and incentive, because not only do they get the tax credit to develop, the acquisition of the land could be rolled into that. I mean, it's all based on the qualification in how much of that they can get. That's one way to look at it, to reduce their costs, including infrastructure. But that even after the affordability period, they maintain the asset and have a continuous revenue stream from it. So I can't say it's kind of apples and oranges when you talk about single family development, and it's like you develop it, you sell it at one time. I'm not speaking to that. That's not where we're at. But talking about that balance between having a benefit to the public who always want to occupy those units because there are some rental controls, but also for the developer because they have that long-standing revenue stream from the project, and that really lends to the effectiveness of LIHTC.
And I appreciate that. Again, I'm looking at what the answers I'm looking for are more utilization. If we have these tools for our community to be able to use, and they're not using it, or the private sector, 29 years, I mean, it's such a long time. If we're modernizing it, I'm hoping that we're going to see more of these types of projects. I know I have a little bit more time, Mr. Chair. I just want to ask 2 more questions. Every tax program that the Guam legislature has passed under Chapter 77, the raceway, the soccer stadium, school gyms, the hospital, has worked the same way. A business contributes money to a public project, gets a BPT credit in return. This bill is different, right? It gives the credit directly to the developer for their own project, and this is not a bad idea. In fact, I think it's a better idea for housing. It is a structural first for this government, and especially under Chapter 77. Is this model fully, and I don't know if you can answer, but maybe you can get an answer for the committee, but is this model fully consistent with GITA's authority under Chapter 77, and are there any existing statutory provisions in Chapter 77 that might be read to limit credits to third-party contributors, or maybe there could be an illegal opinion? And I know you can't answer that, but hopefully we can get an answer to the committee. And then finally, Article 14, which we recently amended, covers tax credits for football field rehabilitation for the Guam National Youth Football Federation. And I'm hoping that GITA can get back to the committee with this answer for me specifically, but to the committee. Can GITA tell us what practical lessons from administering Articles 3 through 14 should we apply to this new Article 15? Were there administrative bottlenecks in issuing certificates, tracking BPT credits, or enforcing project completion requirements that we have not fixed in those earlier programs, but we should try to fix with this respective public policy? I would rather learn from what we've already done than repeat the same mistakes on a program with a $10 million annual price tag. Those are my only concerns, Mr. Chair, for the committee, and in the markup process, if it can be, we can get at least that answer, at least it would be great for us to have that insight going into further deliberations on this prospective bill. But thank you so much, Mr. Chair, for the time.
Susmasi, Senator Gumatato, certainly we will do the work in the markup on all testimony brought forward. We appreciate your attendance to this very closely. Senator Taitigui, you recognize.
Sijusmasi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today to provide testimony. And we all agree that there is a need for affordable housing, and it's always the middle class that is left out, to fend for themselves, especially when we come in times of need and our own disasters, our personal situation where we work so hard that we don't have any assistance because we make way too much for any public assistance, or we don't even make enough to be able to cover our costs for any emergencies that come up. So whenever there's anything that would help the middle class, this is our opportunity that we can move forward with. And I appreciate all the ideas on affordable housing. In fact, I see Guam Housing here, and was wondering if they can come to the table and ask. I have a couple questions to ask.
Sure. Guam Housing folks, can you come forward? Sure.
Okay.
Identify yourself for the record. Whomever you want to ask, Senator, you may proceed.
Edith, right? You're overseeing, you're the director, correct? Yeah. Oh, go ahead and press, yeah.
Thank you, Senator. My name is Edith Pangmin, I'm President of Guam Housing Corporation.
Okay. Thank you so much, Edith, for being here too and having an interest. I know that a bill that I introduced in the 36th Guam legislature to provide some incentive for affordable housing, and I think it was Carlos Camacho that assisted me with that legislation. But it was found that putting it under GITA might be an issue, and that we put it under Guam Housing. Do you remember that legislation?
I do remember that law, yes.
It's the affordable housing.
It has not moved anywhere to my knowledge.
I know, I checked, actually, I checked to see if there has been any reports, because there's a requirement on moving forward on that. Is there a reason why it's not moving forward?
My understanding with that law, if I'm not mistaken, GITA was supposed to establish the rules and regs for that, or the policies for that particular law. And then they will work with us with that one.
According to the law, it says that you would oversee the program, correct?
We will.
Okay. Is this something that you can also do as well? I'll look into that, because from what I gather, that's not what the bill says. It's Guam Housing that was supposed to put this together, but that was how many years ago, and the opportunity to assist our families is, was yesterday. So I'm just really surprised, and I'll work with Gita to find out what happened. Can you answer to that? It's the affordable housing. They're saying that Gita was supposed to put those rules and regs together. And is that, if you don't have the answer, I know this is off track here, but my point is, moving this program to Guam Housing, is that something that Guam Housing can oversee? Or should it stay here at GITA?
We can work with GITA. That's my understanding from that law. So
I'm talking about this particular law.
This current law?
Yeah.
Actually, we came here to listen because we felt that the intent of the proposed bill was basically we are looking at we are the recipients for this law, because we actually we need to look into it further. It's more technical in a sense, where it's GITA and Department of Revenue and Taxation. So that's the reason why we came here, to listen to all the testimonies that have been presented and questions that are being asked. So
do you feel it's going to be jeopardizing bond covenants from what you heard on the testimony from GITA?
Well, that's not for me to answer. I think that would be from GITA's perspective to answer.
Okay, it's just my concern. I'm sure we can find a way around it. Based on the bill, Mr. Fernandez sent you a cursory review. You're very good at looking at bills. Do you see this as like $100 million for middle-class housing, or it says $10 million a year? Is that per year? Would you say that was per year or for the full? 10 years. It says 10 years, but yeah. What do you see this costing the government?
It would depend. That's the cap. So if you were to plan worst case scenario, 10 million over 10 years is 100 million.
Okay.
Truth be told, that barely scratches the surface, if I'm being honest. What it would cost I think arguably you could answer, what would it cost us not to do it? Brain drain and decrease in services, all of those social ills that I think we're really feeling now. But again, if, on the finance side, which is not for me to speak to, they can find the appropriate funding source to sustain that 10 million a year. We were recommended to do this actually in our housing summit. So from the intent perspective, we support it. But from the current language, we believe it needs to be reworked.
And the block development grant from HUD, the 500 million, how much is that pertaining to middle class for housing?
Oh, well, not specific, but for the HUD, the disaster block grant, 70% of the total grant has to be spent on low to moderate income, so 0 to 80% area median income.
So it recovers middle class?
No.
No,
It does, yes, but not in, it would be within that 30% of the funds, but nothing so specific.
There's a measurement they use in here. Would it be considered in that same category for the HUD?
And in here it's slightly off, so they go from 50 to 150%. But the the HUD definition of low income is below 80% area median income. And so, this bill, and I believe that is the intent, to cover a little bit of the low income, those maybe that are not supported by the program or increasing their earnings into the middle income bracket or that missing middle bracket. But yeah, it actually covers both spectrums, both low, moderate, and moderate, or low income and moderate income.
Are you talking about the development grant? Oh, this bill. So again, the development grant, would it help cover middle class?
Not in a significant way, no.
So yeah, it is. 100 million is quite less, considering, we have 500 million for other areas. So
we are looking for a middle class, middle income mixed use development to be both affordable and attainable. We're working with Gita on that right now, and it might involve GURA considering some non-federal funds through the bond market to leverage with the federal funds, but it's still not going to be enough to put in the dent on what's needed for the middle income. That we're really going to rely on the private sector to do that.
okay, also, by the way, Edith, just to let you know that the rules and regulation is in that bill that the Affordable Housing Assistance Fund is required by Guam Housing to create the rules and regulations alongside with Gita. So I'll give you that bill number so you can look at that again, because this is, I don't want to see something like this, the intention of this body to trying to help our families in our community to afford homes. We're seeing there's a lot of apartments available lately. If you look in the paper, openings and affordable housing, and even for seniors. But homes, we don't see that, and to provide that kind of assistance would be very helpful, especially in this middle income. So other than that, by the way, the bill is bill number 348-36, which is now Public Law 36-131. So if you can put that in there and look at it, it shows that Guam Housing has to do the rules and regs. So again, I thank you for being here to Guam Housing, willing to assist, but I hope it's not anything like the bill I just mentioned where nothing is being done at all. And this is how many years since the 36 Guam legislature. So I'm going to be following through with that. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Montanani, you recognize?
Thank you. My questions really are just for better clarification. With the LIHTC program through GORA, I know that in the application process, it's pretty arduous. You have to turn in a proposal, you have to have designs, you have to demonstrate past performance, and turn in timelines. And so with the current program with Gita, can you walk us through how do you become eligible for these tax credits? What do you have to do?
For the tax credits, For,
Right, the current affordable housing tax credit program that's referenced in the testimony from the administrator?
okay,
Because because when it compares to LIHTC, it's pretty intense, everything that you have to submit just to compete for tax credit. So I'm just wondering with GITAs, do you just turn in a piece of paper? What's the difference aside from LIHTC, which is low income, and GITA, which is affordable housing? And
okay, for a tax credit program, and we're not talking the QC side, normally the contractor would come in and apply to reserve the tax credit before they start the project. And within that, in our application, we would say what they need to economically produce with their project, and it's listing jobs, it's listing, like for instance, will be the housing. And once the project is done, they would submit all their invoices and all the expenditures. We will review it, and then should it be in compliance with the tax credit and what they actually assign when we issue the certificate, GITA would then issue a memorandum to take to revenue and taxation. That's the tax credit program.
Mr. Esteves, maybe you can kind of clarify on your end what exactly is the differences and how you would be eligible for these tax credits.
Yes, so every year, GURA would have to publish a QAP, that's a qualified allocation plan. So there's obviously the public notice, some public hearings, opportunities for the public to comment on that. We would go to the board to have that published, so there'd be that application period. After we receive the applications and that closes out, then it would go for review by a technical committee, they'll score it, and then it'll go to the board for final decision. That the board would actually make the final determination on what gets selected. But they would do that not based on, but have the recommendation of the selection committee on hand. After which the credit is then reserved. We send a notice to the IRS that the credit has been reserved, but it's not actually captured until the project is complete, in which we would then certify at that point and they can start claiming the credit. They also have to be compliant year over for the entire term of them receiving that credit. So the thing to also consider is that the LIHTC tax credits are much greater in value than I think what this would propose. So it would be the basis of the tax credit times 10 years, because they would be able to claim it every year for up to 10 years. So if it's like a $3 million tax credit, the value of that's actually $30 million that they would go out to the market and syndicate.
Is Allura required for LIHTC?
GURA is the state finance agency for the low-income housing tax credit with the IRS.
And do you see, you mentioned earlier that the GITA program that they have now, it hasn't been effective. What would make it effective? This bill?
Well, the truth is, I mean, because and this is why I want to be very careful when we use definitions, right? And so when I speak about affordable housing, I'm talking about affordable housing, which is 30%, less than 30% of a household's gross household income. But then when you talk and now add in the targeted, which is the LMI, that's when you start having actual workable numbers. So if I say affordable for someone who's 150% AMI, that's like $46,000 a year, right? That they could pay on housing costs. If I talk about somebody who's 50% a year, somebody who's making, maybe $40,000, that's $12,000. And so when you want to think about what's the efficacy of a program and how a developer is going to have uptake, especially for rental, you have to understand what that component is as well. One, whether it's going to be effective for the family you're trying to target, and two, whether there's even any profit incentive for the developer. And to summarize all that, there is no money in affordable housing. You're going to lose. That's plain and simple. Affordable housing for low-income people means subsidized. That's it, plain and simple. The only way you're going to have it self-sustaining is when you have a mixed income development, meaning you have some low income, but you also have moderate income there to balance out the cost of the developer. So no developer is going to run numbers on the QC, and that's never going to break even. They're going to lose out every single time. So it's just not going to be an effective program. Yeah, unless you're offering them like huge qualifying certificates, you can run the numbers, at least especially today, it's not going to work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry,
may I add?
Yeah,
And that's why this is appealing, because it targets the middle class and fills a gap where light tech doesn't. And if we were to see, with amendments, of course, on the multifamily side, this tax credit evolve, the uptake would be you could have some developers or larger developers do bigger multifamily developments and tie it in with light tech. So the light tech can cover the affordable side for the low income, and this can cover the middle income. And you would have much more complete mixed use, mixed income developments.
I'm sorry, I had one more question.
Sure.
Say, for example, you are a developer that was getting tax credits under LIHTC. Would you be able to then qualify for the current program under GITA and get additional?
There shouldn't be any reason why they couldn't. No, yeah, because you got the federal one and you got the state one. In most states, they actually put them together. I think we're one of the, maybe the only ones that don't, right? This would maybe be the first actual effective tax credit program for housing that we put together. But we're very much under-investing from the state or territory level in housing development. But this is a common model pretty much in every jurisdiction I've discussed with regarding the housing finance side. But, you know, again, there's also a component if you want to consider also a credit in the future for infrastructure to support that, right, as an adjunct, because some properties may have the relevant infrastructure, some may not, but you consider the cascading benefit of infrastructure. It's just going to make it cheaper, cheaper, and cheaper to develop, but it's also going to increase the number of units developed because that cost comes down. So the idea is that they all work together to fit the need of what the developer's looking to do. And so just something to consider. I hope that answers your question, Senator.
I've actually heard of that idea, but thank you.
Thank you.
This is Mossy. I just got a comment and then a question, a two-part question too, and then I'll go to the Vice Speaker, have him ask questions and close on the bill. Carlos, you're still online, correct?
Yes, I'm here. You can hear me.
Yeah, so Carlos, so and I thank you, Senator Esteves. I think we're kind of getting to where we're trying to drive here now, is we're trying to leverage programs that can all come together. And the two major issues I think that we're facing as we discuss, and we know this being reported by Cornerstone and others, we have a supply issue that's really, really at the core of what's driving prices and the like. And then we also have and that's also causing the median price issue that exists, which really, when we talk about affordability, the programs coming together are trying to converge to create a payment that an average person can make. That 10, 15, 20 years ago, maybe 15 to 20 years ago, was somewhere in the range between 12 to 14 to 1,500. That's now 2,200 to 3,000, which for most people is just completely unattainable. It's essentially doubled or tripled. So my two-part question is, Carlos, as you reviewed and heard some of the questions and comments as we mark up the bill, do you have any comments on it? And also, will you be available to assist as you're a subject matter expert to help mark up the bill to get to where we're trying to go?
Yes, as you know, I know it got broken up, but on my written testimony, I agree with Antoinette from GITA. Originally, when the bill was written, the only reason that it was a BPT redirect to the developer is that we did, at that time, when I saw the bill, I was assuming they did not want to give the full 20-year benefit for the three-legged benefit as described earlier, which is the BPT, the income tax, and the use tax. This is just a one-off in the BPT. But as I did further research, because it's very critical in the bond covenant, and that's why I think she suggested that as long as they don't touch the 3% that's reserved for the bond covenant, and it's only available to 1%, and when the 1% happens, and it gets funds available, then that's fine. That's why I submitted that we would convert the BPT redirect to a QC program. But on the QC program, because as they described, it was a minimum of 25 units or more, but I think as Antoinette described, it can go down as low as 5 units. So that helps the smaller contractors. In regards to who's
Okay, Carlos, we'll invite you back, but I'm going to go ahead and let the Vice Speaker go if he has any questions for the panel. Vice Speaker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really don't have any questions. I'd like to thank the panel for being here and giving their input, because I think it's very important that we start now making this bill something that is going to be palatable, not just for the government, but also for all those that want to avail themselves of it. We do have a big crisis, and that's a housing crisis. And moving forward and how we're going to be able to address this situation, I mean, there's no silver bullet, but I think coming together and making it better. And actually, Senator Fernando, you're right. It's not about affordable; it's attainable. How do people attain housing? And that's what we want. We want to keep our families here. We want to keep everyone here so that they be able to not just have a family and not just have a job, but have a place that can go home. And that's what this legislation is about. I mean, this bill is just one half of an equation, because the other half is about the financing, right? How people affording the monthly payments, and looking into that, perhaps we can see how is it that we can extend the mortgage periods. I mean, I was just telling the chairman, I said, my home was built 54 years ago. I mean, you pay it for 40 years now, and you still got a very sound structure. So how is it that we can lower perhaps the down payments and also extending the term of a mortgage? And I think that's the other half of the equation, right? Not just the construction costs, but the financing and monthly payments for these homes. And we were talking about a little bit earlier about Guam Housing and their role, and how is it that they can help those that want to also build on Chamorro Land Trust properties, and how can we now make it something that we can continue to put families into homes and not just onto lands that don't have infrastructure. And that has been an issue for many years, where people were given land leases, but there's nothing on it. And that's unfortunate for both, the homeowner, the property recipient, and also for the economy, because if there's no, there's that revolving, what they call it, that the dollar revolving within our economy. Every dollar that stays on is better for our island. So I'd just like to thank you all. And again, Director Esteves, thank you for providing your testimony, and for Gita's testimony, and most especially for the realtors coming out and support this legislation. And this is something that we hope does not stay on the shelves, but actually gets implemented and gets utilized, so that we can put more people into homes. Mr. Chair.
Susan Masi, yeah, and thank you, Mary Guerrero and the team from Guam Housing Corporation. Again, on the off time, they came up in infrastructure, Chamorro Land Trust. We get it, and you're right. I mean, I can see we're all pulling in the same direction. We'll work with Carlos, but Senator Fernando, I think what we came up, and I like the way you approach that, is by combining these programs, marking this bill up to target where it's at, and I think we can address the issue of the impact on finances because of the cap. And I think so. We make it clear what the program is doing and how it's going to get things started in this area. It should be that if we clarify the taxes, the mixed taxes that are identified, as well as the cap, then really we should count on that if it's 10 million, it's 10 million. It's got to be allowed by law to go beyond that. So we would know in terms of what it might do in terms of affecting general fund revenue. So we'll deal with all of that in committee. I'm sure Carlos will help us mark it up. And thank you once again for Guam Association of Realtors and Monty McDowell, as well as Liz Duenas for their testimony from their committees. And we'll mark the bill up to see if we can just put another tool in the toolbox to try to take care of this monster of affordable housing or attainable housing, as was mentioned. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, this will conclude today's public hearing on bill numbers 309 and 30638 COR. The committee will continue to accept written testimony on the bills within 7 calendar days, from which may be addressed to Senator Christopher M. Duenas as chairman of the committee and mailed to 163 West Chalan Santa Papa, Gardenia, Guam 96910. You may also email your testimonies to me at senator.duenas@guamlegislature.gov. This public hearing is now adjourned, and the time is almost just noon. Enjoy your lunch. God bless you. We are adjourned.